Chapter 29-23. The outside world is too dangerous. 3. As the place it went to became more and more remote, the sky became completely dark. However, along the way, the blood cherry blossom did not encounter a single beast, much less a person. The blood cherry blossom's mood was getting worse and worse, and she was deeply worried. It had such a noble status, so how did it end up needing him to come out and find food? It's all because the city lord is too useless. Otherwise, it would not have needed to do it by itself. The other party should have taken the initiative to offer it food. Now, it had to rely on itself even though it was hungry. This was something that the blood cherry blossom, who had always lived like a prince, could not accept. There seemed to be a rabbit there? With the help of the moonlight, the begrudging blood cherry blossom suddenly discovered a snow-white rabbit lying on the grass not far away. Eating grass? As she moved over bit by bit, the blood cherry blossom drooled all over the ground again. This rabbit was really too fat. It wanted to eat. It wanted to eat. The rabbit in front of it was the safest food it had encountered since leaving the city lord's mansion. It was alone, unremarkable, and the most ordinary of beasts. Furthermore, they were in the wilderness. If it ate a rabbit here, no one would notice anything unusual. Thinking of this, blood cherry blossom became excited. When it slowly moved to the fat rabbit's side, the fat rabbit suddenly turned its head and looked at the little red flower that was floating over in a silly way. It was no wonder people said rabbits were stupid. It was indeed so. Not only did he not have any sense of danger, but he was also staring at it without blinking. Be good, Xiaotu. Quickly come into sister's arms. Don't run. Don't run. Two tiny tentacles stretched out from the blood cherry blossom's pistol and wrapped around the fat rabbit's body as fast as lightning. The fat rabbit did not struggle at all, and obediently allowed itself to be tied up, but its eyes were filled with curiosity as it stared at the blood cherry blossom. Oh. As expected, he was a fool. Blood cherry blossom looked at the fat rabbit's state and thought to herself, but it doesn't matter if it's a little stupid. It's just food after all. At the thought of this, the famished blood cherry blossom no longer hesitated. It immediately stabbed the sharp spikes on its tentacles into the fat rabbit's body. But at the same time it heard a crack. Fuck. The spike actually broke. Then she felt pain in her tentacles. Shue cherry blossoms was depressed. How did this happen? Pulling aside the fur on the fat rabbit's body, the blood cherry blossom took a closer look. It was no different from ordinary rabbit skin. Why was it so hard? The blood cherry blossom, unwilling to give up, grew two more sharp thorns and stabbed down, but with another crack, the thorns broke again. This time, it was even more painful than the last time. The fat rabbit didn't seem to realize the danger it was in. It only stared at the blood cherry blossom with its innocent black eyes. The blood cherry blossom was furious. She violently shook the fat rabbit's body and roared. Damn it! What the hell are you? Are you still a rabbit? How could he have such a tough skin? Can't you let me eat? The fat rabbit blinked its black eyes innocently. Motherfucker. You're still pretending to be innocent? The blood cherry blossom was so angry that she was about to go crazy. The fat rabbit seemed to be quite curious about it. It stared at the blood cherry blossom for a long time without saying a word. Then it reached out with a small paw and touched the bright red petals of the blood cherry blossom. After touching them, it gently pulled with its paw. With a snap, a petal was torn off. The blood sakura was dumbfounded and even forgot to react. However, the intense pain from the broken petal jolted it back to its senses. Following that, it let out an earth-shattering scream. The fat rabbit's claw held the petal, still looking innocent. You, I'm going to kill you. The blood cherry blossom flower, which had a petal torn off, endured the intense pain and roared. Hearing this, the fat rabbit only glanced at the blood cherry blossom indifferently. Then it held the petal in its claw and calmly brought it to its mouth and began to chew. The blood cherry blossom couldn't believe it. The two eyes on the pistol were so wide that they were about to pop out. When it saw the fat rabbit in its grasp calmly swallow one of its petals, it was so shocked that it turned into stone. Thanks, it was only when another excruciating pain came that the blood cherry blossom came back to its senses. Immediately after, it saw another petal caught in the claws of the dead rabbit. It had only taken a glance before the fat rabbit began eating it again. Ha! Pain, anger, fear, confusion, depression, and other emotions simultaneously enveloped the blood Sakura. Earth-shaking, heaven-shaking, and heaven-shaking screams rang out continuously. However, the fat rabbit seemed to be unconcerned, pulling the petals of the blood Sakura and stuffing them into its mouth again and again. The intense pain continued to transmit to its senses, causing the blood cherry blossom to be in so much pain that it wished it was dead. What kind of monster had it encountered? A flower-eating rabbit? He even dared to eat its petals. Wasn't he afraid of being poisoned to death? At this moment, the blood cherry blossom was filled with intense fear. It had originally wanted to eat the rabbit, but it had actually been bitten by its food. Who could accept such an outcome? And from now on, small animals like rabbits had become the creatures it feared the most. Don't eat rabbits anymore. The blood cherry blossom endured the excruciating pain and let go of its tentacles, wanting to throw the fat rabbit away. However, the fat rabbit's movements were quite swift. Before it was thrown away, its claws flew out and tore off a few more petals. Screaming, the blood cherry blossom fled. The outside world was too dangerous. It was better not to come out. One time, the blood cherry blossom came out to hunt for food on its own, and it was scared half to death. It had to be known that ever since it had been raised by the main body, it had always been pampered. It didn't have to worry about anything, only focusing on drinking blood to strengthen itself. But now, a mere food had created a serious psychological barrier in its heart. The blood cherry blossom even felt that it would never love again. After it ran back to the city lord's mansion, panting heavily, it immediately hid in the underground secret room to recuperate. It did not dare to let anyone know about such an embarrassing matter. Moreover, after a few petals were swallowed, its strength was seriously affected. More importantly, it realized that it was afraid of food. It was disgusted with food. However, the city lord didn't know what had happened to the blood cherry blossom, and he had gone to great lengths to get a bunch of rabbits and put them in front of the blood cherry blossom for it to eat. Who knew that when the blood cherry blossom saw the rabbit, its reaction would be so intense, and it trembled as it asked the city lord to take the rabbit away. Hearing this, the city lord was puzzled. Didn't this flower starve for 2 days? Why was he so resistant to food? Sir, we can't catch him now, the city lord said helplessly. At night he sent people out again. The guards were also covered in injuries, but the beastie that injured the guards was not caught. Trash! Get out, get out! Without my permission, you're not allowed to come in and disturb me. Shue Cherry Blossoms was unwilling to listen to the city lord's explanation, and she shouted in excitement. The city lord had no choice but to leave. In the next few days, the arena was held as scheduled. Lung Ruoxue continued to stand on the stage as the arena lord with a domineering air. Meanwhile, the people that the city lord had sent to deal with Lung Ruoxue continued to disappear one after another. After a few days, the city lord clearly felt that the situation was serious. If only 1 or 2 of them had escaped, it would still make sense. But all of them had escaped. That was not realistic. However, he couldn't point out any suspicious points because everyone could clearly see that Lung Ruoxue didn't do anything. It could be said that the disappearance of the people he had sent was rather strange. Fortunately, Lord Blood Cherry Blossom hadn't complained about being hungry in the past few days, and had refused to see him several times. As such, he was able to calmly ignore her. Meanwhile, the anorexic Blood Cherry Blossom started to wither. A week later, Lung Ruoxue was still active in the arena. Her days were free and easy. It had been almost half a month since she had entered the arena. She felt that as long as she stayed for another half a month, not only would she be able to win a high stake, but Blood Cherry Blossoms might also starve to death. However, the city lord's mansion seemed to have quieted down these 2 days, because the number of people sent by a certain city lord was getting fewer and fewer. Sometimes, she only had one opponent for the whole day, and the rest of the time, she would be alone in the ring in a daze. After nearly half a month of stimulation, the staff was obviously used to such things. They no longer panicked and calmly ignored her. This point made Lung Ruoxue rather depressed. However, There were still a lot of people in the audience, and many of them came because they wanted to know who would be able to get her off the ring. On this day, Lung Ruoxue went up to the arena as usual. The first thing she did was to take out a recliner and some snacks, then lie on it. Even though the crowd was used to this, they still couldn't help but sigh every time they saw this. It was so enjoyable to watch the other side fight. At this moment, a powerful pressure suddenly appeared out of thin air. The weak audience was so shocked that their faces turned pale, and blood flowed from the corners of their mouths. Meanwhile, the evildoer and the others who were watching the battle in the private room smiled. They knew that the city lord's mansion was finally going to make a big move. He had really made them wait for a long time. However, the city lord's mansion had finally sent out a heavyweight. It was unlike before, when they had only sent a few deity emperors to their deaths, and in the end, their strength had dropped to that of a deity king. It's not bad this time. They knew to send out a reverent god. The appearance of the reverent god made the evildoer and the others a little excited, but the burly man who had been with them the whole time was a little worried. This person is so strong. Of course he's strong, he's a reverent god. Uncle Long said indifferently. Arg. Reverent god level. The reverent god of the city lord's mansion was mysterious and powerful. This was bad. Apple was in trouble. Hurry up and make her admit defeat. Otherwise she'll be dead. The burly man's face was filled with worry, but his words made the demon and the others quite unhappy. Uncle Long directly gave the burly man a hard knock on the head and then roared. Your sister. You're the one who's going to be unlucky and die. Open your eyes wide and see clearly. No matter who is unlucky or who dies, it will not be my apple's turn. Chapter 29-24. The rabbit is not to be trifled with. 1. The burly man felt wronged after being yelled at by Uncle Long. Although his words were not pleasant to hear, they were true. He recognized the man in the ring. He was one of the 4 reverent gods in the city lord's mansion. Although he was the weakest one, he was still a giant compared to Apple, a small god. Unfortunately, his good intentions had been misunderstood. In fact, he only wanted to say, let Apple admit defeat. However, in the current situation, no one would take his suggestion. After he said that, Uncle Long and the others glared at him fiercely. So he didn't dare to say what he was thinking. However, it didn't feel good to have something he couldn't say. The burly man was very worried, but Lung Ruoxue, who was on the stage, was rather calm. She looked at the arrogant hierarch indifferently and asked with a smile. Do you want to admit defeat? Admit defeat? The hierarch was stunned. He had heard that this was what the woman in front of him always said, but he didn't expect that this woman would ask him the same question when she saw him. This was really preposterous. However, he automatically assumed that the other party had asked this because she didn't know his strength. Do you know who I am? A certain divine master asked after some thought. My opponent. Lung Ruoxue revealed a faint smile. Then do you know my strength? A certain hierarch asked when he noticed that Lung Ruoxue's answer did not satisfy him. Does your strength matter to me? Lung Ruoxue asked instead of answering. These words instantly made the proud and confident supreme divinity depressed. Fuck. What did this woman mean? Shouldn't he first understand his opponent's strength before fighting? At this moment, he deeply doubted Apple's intelligence. He felt that she was either ignorant and fearless or stupid. Am a reverent god and you, a puny god, want me to admit defeat? A certain supreme divinity took a deep breath and shouted at Lung Ruoxue with a displeased expression. Lung Ruoxue was still smiling, and she said in a seemingly speechless manner, do you think that you're proud that your strength is comparable to me, a small divine warrior? If I were you, I wouldn't reveal my identity in public and fight a god as a reverent god. You have the nerve to say it, but am too embarrassed to listen. You. Lung Ruoxue's mocking words made a supreme god's face turn red. He couldn't form a complete sentence for a long time. The audience was also in a heated discussion. No one had expected a supreme god to challenge Apple. Reverent god? Where did it come from? I've never heard of any force having an idol supreme god. It seemed that there was one in the city lord's mansion, but the reverent god of the city lord's mansion had always liked to be mysterious and rarely appeared in public. So they were not sure if this person was from the city lord's mansion. If it wasn't he, it would be fine. If it was, Then it would be too embarrassing. Although the people of the City of Desolation were mostly evil, they were not fools. They could tell that the hierarch had come with ill intentions. Coupled with his identity and the fact that this place belonged to the City Lord's mansion, they easily came to the conclusion that the City Lord's mansion wanted to kill Lung Ruoxue. However, Lung Ruoxue was still as calm as the clouds and as light as the wind. It was as if she was detached from the world. They had no choice but to submit to each other. However, they would not sympathize with Lung Ruoxue. They only felt that she was in for a bad time. Ai. It was such a pity. In the past half a month, this woman had brought them a lot of fun, and had constantly refreshed their world views. Hence, if Lung Ruoxue was really killed by the reverent god before them, they would still be a little reluctant. At this moment, they heard Lung Ruoxue ask again. "Hey hierarch, are you going to admit defeat?" Thanks instantly, the audience was in a mess. They had lost count of the number of times they had lost count. When they heard this, the audience felt that this woman was really too bold. It was reasonable for her to ask this question when she didn't know the other party's strength. Now that she knew the other party was a reverent god, she still asked this question. Wasn't she just drawing hatred? Shouldn't you be the one to admit defeat at this time? However, it was obvious that Lung Ruoxue would never admit defeat. As for the divine reverent, he was petrified and remained silent for a long time. It was undeniable that a certain supreme divinity had lived for so many years, but he had never met someone like Lung Ruoxue. He had never encountered such a thing. Hence, he did not know how to react for a moment. When he finally regained his senses, he saw that Lung Ruoxue was only smiling at him. She continued to ask, "Your Excellency, do you admit defeat?" "You don't want to admit it," a certain hierarch said through gritted teeth. If he could, he would have torn Lung Ruoxue to pieces to vent his anger. This woman was too detestable. He knew that he was no match for the woman in front of him, so he didn't waste any more time and directly attacked. As soon as the reverent god made his move, the audience held their breaths. They did not even dare to breathe loudly. Countless sympathetic gazes involuntarily drifted towards Lung Ruoxue. Lung Ruoxue, who was on the stage, only smiled when she saw her opponent make a move. She then circled around the stage and dodged, occasionally returning a whip. A certain supreme divinity was completely enraged after failing to hit the target several times in a row. He roared, "Apple, you're dead today. I remember what I've said before? Those who have said this to me are all dead." Lung Ruoxue laughed helplessly. Taking advantage of the gap, she lashed out with her whip again. At this moment, the reverent god who was in a state of anger was obviously triggered by her words. As a result, his reaction was half a beat slower, and he was just in time to be swept by Lung Ruoxue's whip. Instantly, he felt a burning pain in his heart. Unfortunately, before he could say anything, he disappeared under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Ugh. He ran away again? The audience was already used to such a situation. The burly man in the private room was also dumbfounded. Where are they? He ran away? I guess his mother asked him to go home for dinner. Uncle Long replied calmly. Such an answer made the burly man a little confused, because he knew that the reverent god no longer had a mother. At the same time, Lung Ruoxue, who was on the stage, roared in anger. "Judge, is this the person you've been looking for? All of you are running away and not admitting defeat before you run. What are you trying to do?" The judge who was being questioned was sweating profusely. He didn't know how to answer. Then he rolled his eyes and pretended to faint. Lung Ruoxue was extremely angry. She rudely kicked the timid and useless judge off the stage. The stage was not low, and the judge was not prepared at all. He was kicked off and fell directly to the ground, smashing a deep pit in the ground. Lung Ruoxue's impressive feat of beating up the judge had once again opened the eyes of the audience. This was the first time they had seen a participant beating up a judge. It was too brutal. At that moment, the audience looked at Lung Ruoxue with caution. Chapter 29-25. The rabbit is not to be trifled with, too. The staff member didn't dare to step forward, or he would definitely be the next one to be beaten up. This time, he went straight to the city lord's mansion to report the matter without his superior's instructions. When the city master heard that even the reverent god had gone missing, he was shocked. What? What was going on? He knew that the situation was serious, but he didn't know what the problem was. He couldn't understand why his subordinates had all disappeared after the fight with the little divine called Apple. He had lost a divine emperor, but he had lost a reverent god, which made his heart ache. It should be known that there were only 4 reverent gods in the city lord's mansion, including him. The 4 of them were also the divine master's secret forces, and existed as a surprise force. Now that one of them had suddenly been lost, he really did not know how to explain it to the divine master. Even so, he did not suspect Lung Wuxia. Firstly, her strength was too low to kill a reverent god-level cultivator. Secondly, they were in a public place with so many eyes watching. It was impossible for her to use any mysterious methods. Otherwise, they would definitely be discovered. Apple wasn't suspicious, but he lost his people. Even if this had nothing to do with Apple, he had to get rid of Apple. That woman must be a jinx. Otherwise, why would his subordinates all disappear after fighting her? At the thought of this, the city master had no choice but to send another reverent god to fight, and repeatedly urged that Apple must be killed. When Lung Wuxia saw that another godly venerable rank expert had come to challenge her, she was in a great mood. She had heard that there were 4 reverent god-level experts in the city lord's mansion. It seemed like she could eliminate 2 of them today. These were all the hidden powers of the despicable people of the Ripple Mist, and the other party would not use them easily. Thus, Lung Wuxia naturally did not want to leave them for the Ripple Mist. At the start of the match, was Lung Wuxia admitting defeat again? Instantly, this newly entered reverent god was also angered. Although he had heard about this woman's eccentric habits before he came and had been mentally prepared, he still couldn't help but be furious when he heard her words. "Am a reverend god." The new hierarch flame roared. "Oh, Your Excellency, do you admit defeat?" Lung Wuxia nodded and asked again. "You're looking for death?" This reverent god's temper was obviously worse than the previous one. Under Lung Wuxia's repeated provocation, he was soon enraged. He did not waste any more time and immediately used his most vicious attack. Due to the hierarch's cultivation technique, he carried a deadly poison on his body. However, he could control the poison and would not use it unless he was facing a strong enemy. Now out of rage, he had actually used the poison on Lung Wuxia, hoping to kill her in one strike. His poison was extremely brutal. Once it touched a person's body, it would immediately corrode the person's body and rapidly spread throughout the entire body. Just as he was confidently waiting for Lung Wuxia to turn into a pile of white bones, Lung Wuxia was still standing in front of him, completely unscathed. She was looking at him with a smile. How was this possible? In his shock, his face was filled with disbelief. At this moment, Lung Wuxia's whip also lashed out and directly hit the reverent god, who was in a daze. The small flame on the whip silently ignited, and in the blink of an eye, the reverent god who had suffered a blow disappeared again without any reason. After the second hierarch disappeared, Lung Wuxia's expression became even more innocent. She then called out to the staff, "Men, what kind of opponent did you pick?" He ran away again. This time, the staff members were even more afraid to appear. As for Lung Wuxia, after she vented her anger by smashing the stage pole into pieces, she felt a little tired and laid back down on the deck chair. The audience was numb. Until very late at night, Lung Wuxia was still alone on the stage. After calling for help to no avail, she could only take out her tent, set it up on the spacious ring, and then went in again. Obviously, she was going to sleep here today. This scene left the audience speechless. "Thanks this is where you're going to stay?" The burly man in the private room looked at the ring in a daze, not knowing how to react. "I have no choice. There's no staff here, so Apple wouldn't dare to go out on their own," Uncle Long said. Ugh. Uncle Long's words were so natural that the burly man was at a loss for words. At this moment, his feelings were rather complicated. After Lung Wuxia entered the tent, she immediately moved into the bracelet. After Qingju saw her, he smiled and teased her. "Sister, you're really planning to stay here today? What else can we do? The staff won't show up, so if I go down myself, I'll give them an excuse to kick me out." am not that stupid. Lung Ruoxue replied honestly. Hehe. Sister, the city lord's mansion won't be sending anyone here today, so you can stay here in peace. Qingju laughed. Yes, green vessel, is Tsang around? Lung Ruoxue nodded as she asked. It seemed like she had not seen Tsang for a few days. He's not here. I don't know where that guy went. Is there something big sister wants to see it for? Qingju asked. It's nothing. I just want to know what it's been doing recently. Lung Ruoxue smiled. Sister, that guy must have been causing trouble for the city lord's mansion. Qingju pouted his little mouth and said with slight displeasure. If he could, he wanted to do that too. But now he couldn't leave the bracelet at all. If that's the case, isn't the city lord's mansion in a terrible fix now? Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. Hehe. His sister had guessed right. The city lord is about to go crazy because of the disappearance of the experts from the city lord's mansion. Qingju gloated. Then how about we add some more trouble to him? Lung Ruoxue suggested after blinking her eyes. All right. What does big sister want to do? Qingju asked with a smile. There is news that there are man-eating flowers in the city of abandoned ruins. The missing strong men may have been eaten by the man-eating flowers. Lung Ruoxue said after some thought. Okay, leave it to me. Qingju nodded and promised to complete the task. After giving her idea, Lung Ruoxue walked into the purple bamboo house. Not long after, the evil demon and the others also entered the bracelet. There was green vessel outside to monitor the situation, so they did not have to worry about anything. Even after hearing that Lung Ruoxue had set up a tent, the staff still did not appear. At this moment, all of the arena's staff had been summoned to the city lord's mansion to receive the city lord's thunderous wrath. 2 reverent god-level experts had disappeared in one day. The city lord's heart ached just thinking about it. More importantly, he had no idea how those people had disappeared. This was what he was most worried about. Looking at the city lord pacing back and forth in the living room, his subordinates, who were waiting to be reprimanded, did not dare to make a sound. At this time, the city lord suddenly raised his head and asked, "What's that woman doing? Have you left the arena?" "Not yet." The person in charge of the arena carefully replied. "Don't bother with her. When she can't stand it anymore and gets off the ring, it'll be her loss." The city lord ordered. "Yes." The person in charge of the arena quickly responded. He didn't dare to say that the other party didn't plan to leave the arena, and had already set up camp on the arena. That woman was very smart and thought quite far ahead. Chapter 29-26. The rabbit is not to be trifled with. 3. As he gave the order, the mayor's mind turned to the missing person again, but after thinking hard for a whole night, he still couldn't figure out the reason. The next day, the news of man-eating flowers eating people in the city of desolation came one after another, and there were many versions. Some versions even pointed the finger at the city lord's mansion, saying that the man-eating flowers were raised by the city lord. As soon as the explosive news came out, the people of the city of desolation, who wanted to see the world in chaos, gathered at the city lord's mansion to protest and demand an explanation. Some people even said that there had been people who went missing in their homes, and they suspected that it was also the doing of the man-eating flower. When the city lord heard this news, he was so angry that his face turned green. Fuck. This was the city of doubts. Wasn't it normal for a few people to go missing? After all, the city of abandoned ruins was not an ordinary city. There were murders happening every day, but no one thought of the man-eating flower. Now, he didn't know where the rumor had come from that the man-eating flower was in his city lord's mansion. As a result, the families who had died before all came to protest against him. Of course, it was said to be a protest, but in reality, it was just to get some benefits. How detestable. This was clearly someone trying to loot a burning house. The city lord was furious. He had never thought that under his rule, there would be someone who would dare to ask him for money. Wasn't this courting death? After giving a few instructions to his subordinates, the city lord turned around and went to the underground secret room. Although he was very angry with the rumors outside, there was indeed a man-eating flower in his residence. More importantly, the flower hadn't come to him for food after so long, which was abnormal in itself. with a trace of suspicion. The moment he entered the secret room, the city lord directly asked, "My lord, are you related to the disappearance of the experts in the city lord's mansion?" "What?" The extremely weak Shui Cherry Blossoms weakly glanced at the city lord, confused by his words. AI. He was hungry. I'm really hungry. However, it could not eat anything. Did you eat the experts of the city lord's mansion? Seeing that Blood Cherry Blossom did not understand, the city lord could only ask again. I didn't eat it. The Blood Cherry Blossom did not know why the city lord was asking this, but it still honestly replied. At the same time, it felt a trace of anger. Was this fellow questioning it? What right did he have to question it? Then why did they go missing? The city lord continued to ask, unwilling to give up. How would I know? The blood Sakura flame roared. It had not eaten for many days, and had not gone out either. How would it know how the person the city lord spoke of had disappeared? There's a rumor outside that there's a man-eating flower that eats people. Seeing that the Blood Cherry Blossom seemed to be a little angry, the city lord could only explain. You suspect that I did it? The Blood Cherry Blossom was enraged. Other than you, sir, the city of abandoned ruins does not have this kind of thing. Although he didn't want to suspect the Blood Cherry Blossom, it was indeed the most suspicious. Furthermore, it hadn't asked him for food in the past few days, so the city lord couldn't help but wonder if the flower had gone to find food by itself, and had already eaten all of his subordinates. After all, the stronger the expert, the more suited the blood Sakura's appetite. And those who had gone missing were all experts. I didn't do it. I haven't eaten for days. Seeing that the city lord was clearly trying to frame it, the Blood Cherry Blossom was so angry that its petals began to shake violently. My lord, we've known each other for so long. I know your appetite very well. In fact, it's nothing if you really did it, but I have to give the Divine Master an explanation. The city lord seemed to be helpless, but the meaning of his words was to admit it. Just admit it. As long as you admit it, the God Lord won't blame me. However, how could the Blood Cherry Blossom be willing to take the blame for this? Its dull petals shook violently as it roared in anger. Open your dog eyes and look clearly. I've lost so much weight. How would I have the mood to eat your people? Ugh. Hearing the Blood Cherry Blossom's words, the city lord unconsciously raised his head to look at the Blood Cherry Blossom. With a single glance, he was given a huge fright. Oh my God! Was this flower with withered petals really Lord Blood Cherry? That didn't seem possible. It had only been half a month. How did it become like this? The city lord was secretly shocked. He didn't understand how Shui Cherry Blossoms had turned him into this. Furthermore, when he had entered, he hadn't raised his head to look carefully. Now that he had seen it, he was so scared that his heart almost stopped beating. My lord, what's wrong? The city lord asked carefully, but in his heart he was thinking, is he sick or hungry? It was fine if he was sick, at least it was none of his business, but if he was hungry, it would be his fault. The Divine Master would not let him off if he knew. I'm hungry. As expected, the words that the city lord least wanted to hear came from Blood Cherry Blossom's mouth. The city lord was shocked again. He had to admit that he hadn't taken good care of the Blood Cherry Blossoms in the past half a month, but he didn't want to. The apple had not been cleaned up, so there was naturally no one who could give food to the Blood Cherry Blossoms. Now, with the man-eating flower incident, the city lord's mansion had suddenly become the target of public criticism. He did not dare to look for food for the Blood Cherry Blossoms with great fanfare. Otherwise, wouldn't all his years of effort be in vain? My lord, there are still some rabbits in the residence. After thinking for a moment, the city lord said, Rabbit? I'm not eating rabbits, tell them to get lost. Get as far away as you can, and don't appear in front of me. The moment Shui Cherry Blossoms heard the word rabbit, she howled madly as if she had been cursed. It was clear that the rabbit had left a deep trauma in her heart. Thanks, but the city lord didn't understand what was going on. He was somewhat dissatisfied with the Blood Cherry Blossom's uncooperative attitude. She was already so hungry, yet she was still so picky. After thinking for a moment, the city lord advised, My lord, rabbit blood is still blood, please make do with it. He really couldn't find her now. Moreover, There are rumors about the man-eating flower outside. If I go to arrest someone for you at this time, I'm afraid that this crime will be confirmed. I don't want to eat people either. Blood Cherry Blossom said weakly. Hearing what it said, the city lord was truly afraid. You're not eating? What was he trying to do? My lord, your health is important. If you don't eat or drink like this, the Divine Master will blame me if he finds out. The city lord said in fear. It's me who doesn't want to eat. What does it have to do with you? Blood Cherry said listlessly. At this moment, the city lord truly believed that the Blood Cherry Blossom was sick. After patiently asking around, he finally found out that the Blood Cherry Blossom had been frightened by the food when it had gone out alone to hunt. And that food was a rabbit. Not expecting this to be the reason, the city lord's mouth twitched violently. This matter was truly too inconceivable. The mighty Blood Cherry Blossom had been frightened by a rabbit. This was truly too damaging to the dignity of a divine master. However, the city lord still immediately expressed that he would capture all the rabbits in the city to avenge the Blood Cherry Blossom. After figuring out the reason, the city lord naturally had no reason to suspect that the Blood Cherry Blossom had eaten the people from the city lord's manor. Of course, that was unless the Blood Cherry Blossom was lying to him. However, this result gave him a headache. Since it wasn't the Blood Cherry Blossom's doing, the missing person couldn't have disappeared from the face of the earth, right? It had to be said that the city lord was right, because those people had indeed evaporated. It was a pity that this truth would forever remain an unsolved mystery in the city of abandoned ruins. Naturally, Lung Ruoxua would not take the initiative to reveal it. After that, the city lord left the underground secret room and found the guards, ordering them to catch rabbits. Hearing this order, the captain of the guards asked in surprise, City Lord, what about the people gathered outside? You still haven't driven them away. The city lord said unhappily. I drove them away, but they came back not long after. Should I arrest them all? The captain of the guards asked helplessly. Catch him. The city lord had thought of this before, but when he thought of the rumors outside, and how he couldn't immediately feed the Blood Cherry Blossoms if he really caught them, he had a headache. He couldn't possibly stay at home and occupy space, right? Don't worry about them. Go and catch me some rabbits. Get all the rabbits in the city. The city lord said cautiously. He felt that first resolving the Blood Cherry Blossom's mental barrier was more important than anything else. As such, be it Lung Ruoxua or those who were causing trouble outside, they were all ignored by City Lord Hongua. Because of the rumors of cannibalism, the number of people who went to the arena to watch the competition had decreased significantly. The staff was nowhere to be seen, leaving Lung Ruoxua alone in the arena to wait for others to challenge her. However, Lung Ruoxua was surprisingly calm. It didn't matter where she stayed. No matter where or when she would not let herself suffer. She would still eat, drink, and sleep well every day. After a week of hard work, all the rabbits in the City of Desolation were finally caught by the guards of the City Lord's mansion. The City Lord put all the rabbits in a huge cage, and took the cage to the underground secret room. After entering, he placed the cage in front of the Blood Cherry Blossom and said, Sir, I've caught all the rabbits in the city. Take a look and see which one it is. No. Quickly take them away. I don't want to see rabbits. When Blood Cherry Blossom saw the cage full of rabbits, she was so scared that she almost fainted. My lord, don't be afraid. It's just a weak rabbit. You see, I can kill one with one slap. The city lord encouraged. After saying that, he even took out a rabbit to demonstrate to the Blood Cherry Blossom, and then slapped the rabbit's head. There was a paw sound. The rabbit's head did not shatter, but the city lord's hand actually broke. The pain caused him to scream loudly. That deafening scream caused the Blood Cherry Blossom petals to tremble in fear. Woo! It was too terrifying. I told you, rabbits are not to be trifled with. Shue Cherry Blossoms trembled as she sobbed softly. Thanks to the city lord, the shadow in its heart grew stronger. This is impossible. It's not scientific either. After taking a healing pill to heal his hand, the city lord roared in disbelief, and then he struck down with his palm again. This time, the palm was directly shattered into pieces. Ha! Looking at his missing palm, the city lord roared madly. How could this be? How could this be? The city lord was about to go crazy, especially when he saw the innocent look in the rabbit's eyes. The anger in his heart was rushing to his head. Chapter 29-27. I want a refund. 1. Your sister. You're still pretending to be innocent? You're still pretending to be innocent? The furious city lord was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Never in his dreams did he think that this rabbit's head would be so hard. What was going on? Who could tell him? Compared to the rabbit's head, his hand was like an egg hitting a stone. The rabbit's head did not break, but his hand did. Bewildered, he took another healing pill. Although the wound on his wrist had stopped bleeding, his hand would not regrow so quickly. More importantly, he could not wait for his hand to regrow, so he simply used his arm to hit the rabbit's head again. A few loud bangs were accompanied by screams, and then the city lord saw his own arm leave his body. Ah! How could it be like this? The intense pain caused the city lord to go even crazier, and the rabbit in his hand once again stretched out its little paw to touch the city lord's face, as if to comfort him. However, the city lord was so frightened by the rabbit's actions that he hurriedly let go of the rabbit. Fuck. Was this still a rabbit? How could there be such a rabbit in the world? The supreme divinity's body was like paper compared to the rabbit's head. Did he still want the supreme divinity to live? The castellan, who was about to go crazy from the scene in front of him, looked at the rabbit who had an innocent expression and was slowly prancing in front of him. His little heart suddenly beat wildly, and he couldn't help but step back. He even shouted, "Stop. You're not allowed to move. He's just standing there." Hearing this, the rabbit continued to use its innocent little eyes to look at the city lord in confusion, and a trace of grievance appeared on its face. Then, it grinned and said in dissatisfaction, "Do you despise me? Yes. I don't like you, so don't come near me." The city lord looked at the calm and composed rabbit, and his heart actually felt fear for no reason. However, the rabbit had obviously become thick-skinned, and it said with a smile, "You said not to get close, so I won't get close? Who do you think you are? I am the city lord of the desolate city." This was the first time the city lord had seen a rabbit that called itself a lord, especially when this rabbit spoke so eloquently. This was also rare. This was because rabbits had always belonged to the food family. Those who could speak were definitely the kings among rabbits. However, even if it was a king-level rabbit, it was still a rabbit. That was why the city lord, who was a reverent god-level expert, could not accept that a reverent god-level expert had actually lost to a rabbit. This fact was simply a great humiliation to him. The city lord is nothing. The rabbit clearly did not care about the city lord's identity. As for the city lord, who thought of himself as a noble, he felt depressed like never before. In all his years of life, no one other than God Lord Mist Ripple and Blood Cherry Blossom had ever made him feel so aggrieved. He could now truly feel it. After taking the medicine to stop the pain, the one-armed city lord completely forgot about his fear of the rabbit. He was so agitated that he roared, "I'll let you know how powerful I am. Hee. How do you want to prove it?" The rabbit was quite curious, so it opened the cage and let all the rabbits out. As soon as the rabbits came out, they surrounded the city lord as if they had received some order. Upon seeing this scene, the city lord was in a state of confusion. He had never thought that one day, he would be besieged by a group of rabbits. This was really too inconceivable. Thanks, however, the rabbits who were ready to beat him up still looked fearless and glared at him fiercely. This made the hierarch feel that his self-esteem had been seriously hurt. Fuck. Why did it feel so bad to be despised by a rabbit? The next second, before he could think further, the rabbits all rushed towards him. A group of rabbits rammed into him together, and the force was so great that he didn't dare to imagine it. At this time, the rabbit with a rather hard head was also shot out like a small cannonball. With a bang, the city lord was knocked to the ground. The rabbits took the opportunity to occupy the territory on the city lord's body, and then used their small claws to scratch each other's body. Whoosh! The cloth was cut by sharp claws. The city lord instantly felt a chill. He wanted to get up, but that damned rabbit actually sat on his face and pointed its furry butt at him. This made the city lord quite mad. After a while, The city lord's body began to show signs of spring, and at the same time he felt as if he had been drenched in water. It turned out that some rabbit had started it, but the rabbits that had occupied their own territory on his body had all raised their hind legs and circled the ground to pee. And Rabbit, who was sitting on the city lord's face, even deliberately showed his eyes for him to admire this scene. Instantly he almost fainted from anger. With his only hand he tried to pull the rabbit sitting on his face away, but the rabbit refused to cooperate. It even slapped the city lord's face with its paw, and instantly, the city lord's face was covered in blood. Gritting his teeth and enduring the pain, the city lord did not understand what was going on. Why was he in such a miserable state today? Who could tell him? It was one thing for the indignant city lord to be suppressed by a group of rabbits, but the hateful thing was that he was firmly suppressed several times when he thought about it. This broke his pride as a reverent god-level cultivator. At this moment, a certain rabbit said to the blood cherry with a smile, "Little flower, you like to eat reverent god-level food the most, right? I'll let you eat this, okay?" Can I refuse? Although the blood cherry blossom loved to treat humans as food, it also knew what could be eaten and what could not. And the city lord in front of it was obviously in the inedible category. Otherwise, who would prepare food for it in the future? It couldn't possibly hate food for the rest of its life, right? Unfortunately, its refusal angered a certain overbearing rabbit. The rabbit snorted coldly and threatened, "If you don't eat him, I'll eat you." Woo. No. This blood cherry blossom had been pampered since it was born, and had always been taken care of in every possible way. Therefore, it had never seen a rascal like the rabbit in front of it. When it heard that the other party was forcing it to eat the city lord, or eat it, it was already trembling in fear. "You don't want it? Do you think that's possible? I'll give you two choices, either you eat him, or I eat you," a certain rabbit said impatiently. In order to have some fun, it had been hiding alone for a long time. How could it be so easily rejected by the blood cherry blossom? In short, only one of them could live. "I'll eat it, okay?" The blood cherry blossom wanted to cry, but no tears came out. She was roaring madly in her heart. "I'm innocent. Your Excellency. You can't." Hearing this, the city lord's heart almost stopped beating in fear, but the rabbit was determined not to give him a chance to speak. It slapped the city lord's face with its paw again and warned, "You bastard! Who allowed you to speak? Shut up. Shut up. In your dreams." He was about to be eaten. Chapter 29-28. I want a refund too. He struggled to get up, but it was as if he was frozen in place, unable to move at all. He didn't know what was going on, but his heart was already burning with more and more fear. Woo, who could answer his questions? Why did it turn out like this? The city lord kept howling in his heart and asked, "There's water inside?" The city lord's speech was already a little incoherent. He had been slapped in the face by a certain rabbit several times. The moment he opened his mouth, his teeth chose to betray, and they fell out with blood. "I'm your ancestor." The rabbit roared domineeringly, and slapped the city lord with its claws again. The city lord was instantly in so much pain that he was overwhelmed with ecstasy, did he not? He specialized in hitting people's faces. After that, the rabbit patted its paws and picked up the city lord's tottering collar, throwing him towards the blood cherry blossom with a whoosh. At the same time it roared, "Catch it!" The blood cherry blossom had long been scared silly, but it did not dare to disobey the rabbit's words. It hurriedly extended two feelers, and tied up the city lord. Seeing this, the city lord begged with tears in his eyes, "Don't eat me. We're partners." Although the blood cherry blossom could tell what the city lord was thinking, it was powerless. If it didn't eat this fellow, it would be the one to die. Sob. How come even a rabbit from the immortal realm is so powerful now? Do you still want to live well? I won't love you anymore. There's no way to play happily anymore. The blood cherry blossom cried bitterly to itself, and then, ignoring the city lord's pleading gaze, it very disloyal stabbed its feelers into the city lord's body. The taste of blood was extremely delicious, but the blood cherry blossom was in no mood to taste it at all. It even felt that its anorexia was getting worse. One had to know that taking the initiative to eat and being forced to eat were absolutely different, okay? When forced to eat, even the most delicious food would become tasteless in the mouth. However, under the rabbit's calm gaze, it did not dare to disobey its words. Otherwise, it felt that its life would be in danger. Its intuition had always been accurate. At this moment, after the blood cherry blossom began to eat, a certain rabbit suddenly cried out, "Men! The city lord has been eaten." The blood cherry blossom, who had just sucked half of her blood, was stunned when she heard this. Fuck. What was he trying to do? Didn't you force me to eat it? Did he have to be so shameless? Blood cherry blossom was about to go crazy. However, under the malicious gaze of a certain rabbit, it did not dare to do anything. It could only stare at the other party stupidly and maintain its blood-sucking posture without moving. When the city lord, who was on his last breath, heard a certain rabbit's cry, he was so angry that his eyes rolled back and he fainted. As the footsteps sounded, the blood cherry blossom became rather uneasy. The tied-up city lord became useless. He couldn't eat if he didn't throw him away, and he didn't dare to throw him away. In the end, under Azure's warning glare, the blood cherry blossom couldn't help but speed up its absorption. When the people outside rushed into the underground secret room, the city lord had already become a shriveled corpse. Looking at the huge bright red flower in front of them, with a human-shaped dried corpse tied to the flower's antenna, the guards who rushed in all had red eyes. Did this flower eat the city lord? Thanks, the guards did not know the identity of the blood cherry blossom, so when they saw that the city lord had been eaten by this man-eating flower, they immediately flew into a rage. Then a middle-aged man ran in. Seeing this scene, he tried his best to calm the guards down and turned his eyes to the blood cherry blossom. The middle-aged man knew the identity of the flower. However, he had never thought that the flower would eat the city lord. What was going on? An inquisitive gaze swept across the blood cherry blossom's body, but the blood cherry blossom did not dare to say a word. It felt wronged. He felt really wronged. The feeling of being wronged and framed by others in all ways was really unpleasant. However, the evidence was right in front of them. Would anyone believe it if it said that it was forced? In addition, under the rabbit's warning gaze, it didn't dare to defend itself. "My lord, what is going on?" The middle-aged man asked after a long time. He was the only reverent god in the city lord's mansion. The city lord had been eaten, and the whereabouts of the other two were unknown. He was the only one left, so he immediately became vigilant. This was the rhythm of something big. He just didn't know who the troublemaker was. And why would Lady Bloodcherry suddenly go crazy? If no one could answer his questions, then all of this would probably become an unsolved mystery. Glancing at the rabbit, the blood cherry blossom didn't dare to make a sound. What else could it be? Your city lord was eaten by this little flower. B. Rabbit, who was playing with his claws, said indifferently. The middle-aged man was surprised to hear that it was a rabbit who had spoken. When did the rabbit become so bold, not even afraid in front of the reverent god? He deliberately released a bit of pressure to test it, but the rabbits in front of him were not affected, which made him a little at a loss. This didn't make sense. A certain rabbit snorted coldly, and the middle-aged man immediately felt an infinite chill and danger. There was something strange about this rabbit, and it was quite powerful. The middle-aged man immediately came to a conclusion and tactfully withdrew his pressure, not daring to meet the rabbit in front of him head-on. However, the narrow-minded rabbit would not be so easy to talk to after being threatened. Therefore, it also released a trace of pressure, which instantly crushed everyone present. The guards all vomited blood, while the middle-aged man's face turned pale. Even the blood cherry blossoms began to tremble even more violently when they felt the pressure. Woo! It knew that this rabbit was not to be trifled with. When did the rabbits of the immortal realm become so powerful? This was really a blow to the flower's self-esteem. The blood Sakura was rather depressed, not knowing what to do, but it didn't dare to say a word. Azure was quite satisfied with the blood cherry blossom's tactfulness. He then turned to the middle-aged man and said, "Submit or die." The middle-aged man was in tears. This was a blatant threat. Yet, the one who threatened him was an unfathomable rabbit. How could he bear this? Ever since he was born, he had never heard of anyone being threatened by a rabbit. Furthermore, weren't rabbits supposed to be weak food? Why was this rabbit so strong? The middle-aged man could not understand even in his dreams. All of this was too surreal. However, all powerhouses at his level knew their own limits and knew which choice was best for them. Therefore, not long after the rabbit asked him to make a choice, the middle-aged man immediately expressed his willingness to submit. Although submitting to a rabbit was indeed damaging to a reverent god's dignity, what was dignity compared to life? The most important thing was to stay alive. In addition, he could also see that the rabbit in front of him was most likely the mastermind behind all this. Now that the city lord was dead, what was there for him to struggle for? Could it be that he had also been fed blood cherry blossoms like the city lord? Chapter 29:29. I want a refund 3. A certain rabbit was very satisfied with the middle-aged man's intelligence and tactfulness. Send someone to invite Apple to the city lord's mansion, he ordered. Apple. The middle-aged man frowned. This name was very familiar. Although he couldn't remember where he had heard it before, he quickly gave the order. At this moment, Wuxia, who was sitting on the arena in boredom, only asked indifferently when she heard that the city lord's mansion had invited her. I'm guarding the arena and was invited by your city lord's mansion. If someone challenges me, what will happen? Hearing this, the guard was a little confused. Oh, my great aunt. The city lord's mansion has changed and you still want to fight? You're really persistent. The guard could not understand Wuxia's feelings. Wuxia did not want to be tricked off the arena like this. One had to know that she was still thinking about the high stakes that the city lord's residence had placed. Moreover, there was still a week before she could get the money. She was not willing to waste all her previous efforts. Since the guard could not give her a satisfactory answer, she would not be so foolish as to leave. The helpless guard could only return to the city lord's mansion by himself. When the middle-aged man saw that the guards did not invite anyone and heard the reason, he was also in a mess. However, he finally remembered who Apple was. As a last resort, he could only personally go and invite people. When they arrived at the arena, before the middle-aged man could introduce himself, he heard Wuxia say, "If you want to invite me to the city lord's mansion, let's end today's battle first." Hearing this, the middle-aged man's mouth twitched. He thought to himself, what a battle maniac. In reality, he was overthinking things. Wuxia was not a battle maniac. The other party wanted him to announce the end of today's battle, so that he would not be absent when someone else challenged him. Of course, there might not be any challengers, but the city lord's mansion definitely wouldn't dare to invite her with good intentions, so she had to be on guard. Miss Apple. After thinking for a while, the middle-aged man still didn't know how to persuade the battle maniac in front of him. More importantly, he didn't know the relationship between the woman and the rabbit. If he accidentally offended someone and angered the rabbit, it would be his fault. What? Wuxia blinked her eyes and waited for him to continue. I'm here on Senior Rabbit's orders to invite you all. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before he answered truthfully. Senior Rabbit? When did the city lord's mansion change to a rabbit? Wuxia asked with a curious smile. Not long ago. The middle-aged man was silent for a moment, and a trace of worry appeared on his face. Miss Apple, please come with me, the middle-aged man said after a long time. It's no problem to walk there, but you have to finish today's game first, or I won't go. Wuxia still had the same request. Why? The middle-aged man asked, puzzled. No one is challenging you now. It's precisely because no one wants to challenge me that the competition has to end. Otherwise, if someone challenges me when I'm not around, I'll lose if I don't accept the challenge. I've made so many bets, so I'm not going to be a spendthrift. Wuxia said with an expression that said, don't even think about tricking me. Seeing that Wuxia clearly didn't trust him, the middle-aged man's mouth twitched. However, he finally understood. The other party was unwilling to leave, because she was afraid that someone would take the opportunity to challenge her while she was away. Furthermore, she had placed a bet on herself and was afraid that she wouldn't be able to collect the money. What a money grubber. However, he suddenly remembered that everyone in this group had bet $1 billion. $1 billion. Oh my God! How could he have forgotten about this? No wonder the other party was unwilling to leave the ring. Was he waiting for a month to withdraw the money? There were only a few days left until the 1-month deadline. At the thought of this, the middle-aged man decisively ended the match. Right now, the city lord's mansion was in the hands of a certain rabbit, and the woman in front of him had been invited by Senior Rabbit, so he would invite her back no matter what. He only hoped that Senior Rabbit wouldn't go crazy after hearing that the other party might become the city lord's mansion's biggest creditor. However, his thoughts were obviously unnecessary. After inviting Apple and the rest back to the city lord's mansion, the brutal rabbit immediately turned into a cute little pet and pounced on Lung Ruashua, shouting, "Girl, I missed you so much." The middle-aged man didn't know how to react. Senior Rabbit called her Apple Girl and was so intimate with her. What was going on? However, he was smart enough not to ask the question in his heart. He just quietly stood to the side and acted as a mural. At this moment, Uncle Long and Dongfeng Yu walked over and smiled at the middle-aged man. "Sorry for the disturbance. Why don't I see the city lord?" "He's already dead." Lowering his eyes, the middle-aged man said indifferently, "Dead? How did he die? They haven't even made a move yet?" Uncle Long and Dongfeng Yu truly thought that Song had only come here to bully the servants and was treated as a distinguished guest under the crushing pressure of his super strength. They didn't expect that the city lord had died, and he was now the master of the city. The two of them were a little confused and embarrassed, not knowing what to say. "Thanks then," the middle-aged man continued. "The city lord's mansion is now in the hands of Senior Rabbit. I've already chosen to submit to it. A wise man is a wise man. If he didn't want to die, he had to surrender. This was the rule that the strong were respected, and everyone had to abide by it. You've made a wise choice." After a moment of silence, Uncle Long patted the other party's shoulder and said, he couldn't help but think to himself, Senior Tsong's claws are really fast. He didn't even inform us beforehand, causing us to be completely unprepared and take over the city lord's mansion. No. If that was the case, who could they ask for the bet from? Uncle Long could sense the severity of the situation, and he looked at the middle-aged man with an unfriendly gaze. The middle-aged man's heart trembled when he saw Uncle Long's malicious gaze. What was going on? He was very obedient. He didn't say anything that no one would hear, and he didn't do anything that he shouldn't have done. In fact, he was the most low-key among the 4 reverent god-level experts in the city lord's mansion. So he really couldn't figure out what had happened. Looking at a certain someone's gaze, it seemed that the matter was quite serious. The middle-aged man was a little uneasy. Even though he was a reverent god, reverent gods also cherished their lives the most. Before the fight, we made a bet that each of us would get 1 billion top-grade crystals. Now may I ask, how should we calculate this sum of money? Uncle Long saw the confusion on the other party's face, so he had to ask directly. Hearing this, the middle-aged man went crazy. "You bastard! Just how much of a money grubber were these people?" Apple had refused to follow him to the city lord's mansion because of the bet, and now this middle-aged man was also asking about the bet. How? What else could he do? The city lord's mansion is already yours, and they've also been trained by Senior Rabbit to be obedient. Yet you still want them to bleed? Swallowing his saliva, the middle-aged man carefully reminded, "The city lord's mansion is already in your pocket. So what? We're still at a loss. We have 1 billion each, and the ratio is 1 to 100 million. How much is that? Does your city lord's mansion have that much wealth?" Uncle Long said with a look of disdain. The middle-aged man was speechless. They were clearly being despised. How did this happen? He really couldn't understand what Uncle Long and the others were thinking. What kind of trouble was this? However, he did not know how to react, so he could only remain silent. At this moment, Song also started to talk to Lung Ruashua about the city lord's mansion. After Lung Ruashua heard this, she frowned and asked, "This person isn't being controlled by that killjoy?" "No, I didn't. He has already submitted to me and is my man." Azure smiled evilly. "What about the guards?" Lung Ruashua asked again. She didn't think that Song would actually do such a big thing behind her back. Before this, she was still thinking about whether to clean up the city lord's mansion and snatch it for herself. Now she didn't need to think about it. Song had already made the decision for her. I've also completed the contract. Azure said with a smile. What about the blood cherry blossoms? Lung Ruoxue continued to ask. If she killed the blood cherry blossom now, it would definitely alert the fog, so she was a little hesitant. Keep it for now. I will release a trace of divine sense to keep an eye on it. It's so scared of rabbits now, it definitely won't dare to cause trouble. Azure said confidently. That's good. Lung Ruoxue was relieved. Song was a reliable person, and it was the best choice to keep the city lord's mansion in his arms without alerting the fog ripple bitch. However, the middle-aged man who was being discussed as the main character was not in a good mood at all when he heard the conversation between the man and the beast. Two of you, when discussing how to deal with others, can't you do it behind the back of the person involved? He really couldn't accept the other party's direct way of speaking. However, the Reverend God had a strong mind. He quickly calmed down and became familiar with Uncle Long and the others. The next day, Lung Ruoxue still wanted to fight in the arena. When Lu Fan, the middle-aged man, heard this, he was so speechless that he almost went crazy. Didn't he say yesterday that everything in the city lord's mansion would belong to them? He even handed over the city lord's estate's many years of collection. Why were these people still thinking about the bet? So what if you win? It's all your money. After that, Lung Ruoxue also came to her senses and returned to her room with a gloomy expression. How could he not be depressed? So much money just flew away with little wings. Feeling that he had done something wrong, Song was a little embarrassed. In fact, if the city lord had not captured it, it would not have thought of occupying the city lord's mansion. But now it was too late to say anything. It was impossible for the city lord to be resurrected. But could the city lord's mansion be retreated? Thinking of this, Song went to Lu Fan and said, I want to return the goods. Return what goods? Lu Fan was stunned. He didn't quite understand Song's words. I want to withdraw from the city lord's estate. This way, the city lord's estate can compensate my family's NIU. Azure said matter-of-factly. Lu Fan tried his best to open his eyes wide. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Was he hearing things? Was he hallucinating? Otherwise, why would he feel that this matter was so unreliable? Was this even allowed? Chapter 2930. Clue 1. Swallowing, Lu Fan said with some difficulty. Master, everyone in the city lord's mansion has already submitted to you. So why should we still care about the bet? With the arena, we'll definitely be rolling in money in the future, so a little bet really doesn't mean much. We'll be able to earn it back very quickly. Please don't abandon us because of the bet. Lu Fan tried to persuade him, but he was wailing in his heart. It's already like this, and you're still regretting it? But he had never heard of such a thing. Faced with the fact that he had to return the goods, he was quite depressed, so depressed that he was about to fall into depression. When Song heard his words, he couldn't help but frown and think. His silent appearance made Lu Fan quite uneasy. After a long time, Song looked up at Lu Fan and said, What you said makes sense. It made too much sense. Hearing Song's words, Lu Fan's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He was touched, he was at ease, and he heaved a huge sigh of relief. But it'll take a long time to make money, right? Thinking about it, Song said. Hearing this, Lu Fan's heart sank. Master, can we not be so anxious? He thought. It was better to make money in a long-term way, so he never felt that it was slow to make money. After thinking for a while, he asked, Master, will there be no city of abandoned ruins in the future? Last night, he had already found out about Lung Ruoxue's identity. Hence, he was naturally worried about the future of the City of Desolation. He had lived here for so long and had deep feelings for this place. Hence, he really did not want to see the City of Desolation disappear from the God world. Why do you say that? Azure blinked and asked in confusion. As the saying goes, there is a reason for its existence. Since the City of Abandoned Ruins has existed for so many years, there is absolutely no reason to cancel it. My feeling. Lu Fan said carefully. Oh. As long as the City of Abandoned Ruins did not disappear, it would always exist. Don't worry. Of course, you must also be wary of the Killjoy bitch. Azure said indifferently. What's the point of being desperate? It's really possible. Lu Fan believed that if the bitch, rhyme, knew about this, she would definitely fly into a rage, and the city of abandoned ruins might not be able to survive. Regarding this matter, he was also somewhat helpless. After all, the combat power of the Fog Ripple Slut was not something he could match. Therefore, even if he wanted to protect the city of forsaken desolation from being targeted, it was quite difficult. Lu Fan looked at the rabbit in front of him. It was its new master. Lu Fan knew that the rabbit was crucial to whether the city of the abandoned ruins would not disappear from the divine world. Master, the city of abandoned ruins is very profitable. After a long silence, Lu Fan gave him a friendly reminder. He could tell that his master's family was a money grubber, and he hoped that this would move his master and protect the city of abandoned ruins. Sure enough, Song's eyes couldn't help but light up when he heard this, and he asked with great interest, "Very profitable? How much do you earn?" The most profitable business in the city of abandoned ruins is the challenge tournament. So as long as we vigorously develop this aspect, there will be no limit to the amount of money we can make. Lu Fan introduced. Are you sure? However, the city of abandoned ruins is too closed and there aren't many customers. I'm afraid that the profit is limited? When Azure heard this, he thought for a moment. I can earn a lot. Especially in terms of wagers, the winning rate is very low. Lu Fan said with a smile. I see. Azure frowned and thought for a while before continuing. Then I'll take you in temporarily. If this place doesn't make any more money, I'll throw it away. Thanks. Song's matter-of-fact words made Lu Fan want to run away in tears. Master, can you not be so realistic? The answer was no. If it wasn't realistic, then it wouldn't be Azure. After taking a few deep breaths, Lu Fan changed the topic and said, Master, there are rumors that there are man-eating flowers in the city lord's mansion. We must suppress this matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. There is indeed one. Azure blinked and said honestly. There was, but he couldn't say it. Otherwise, the prestige of the city lord's mansion would definitely decline. Lu Fan thought to himself. But clearly, Song Kai didn't care about the prestige of the city lord's mansion, because everyone here knew that the city of forsaken ruins belonged to that bitch, Ripple Mist. Therefore, if he wanted to ruin her reputation, it would be her reputation. It had nothing to do with him. Immediately, Azure waved his claws and ordered. Pass down the order that there are indeed man-eating flowers in the residence. Lu Fan was shocked. Master, what the hell was this? If this continued, would the city lord's mansion still be able to survive? Are we still going to earn money? Master, it's just speculation outside. Without evidence, they wouldn't dare to make a move. But once it's confirmed, the consequences will be unimaginable. So, please think twice. Lu Fan said worriedly after a long time. I've thought about it. I'll tell the public that the man-eating flower is a clone of rime ice. And its food is blood, so it has to eat a few people every day. In addition, I'll say that it's their honor to sacrifice themselves for the divine master. Azure said with a smile. Was he going to turn against the divine lord's manor? Lu Fan was shocked. Did he not want to make money? Master, aren't you going to earn money? Lu Fan could not help but ask. I'm earning. However, we have to first settle the man-eating flower rumor. Azure said matter-of-factly. But if that's the case, I'm afraid the city of abandoned ruins will be in chaos. Lu Fan reminded him. What are you afraid of? I've been in the city of abandoned ruins for a few days, so I know the situation here very well. You just have to follow my instructions. I'll take responsibility for anything. Song said. Yes. Lu Fan nodded. Since his master had said so, he had no reason to hesitate. Then Lu Fan turned around and left to handle this matter. Not long after, the news that there was indeed a man-eating flower in the city lord's mansion, and that it was an incarnation of Wu Yan spread throughout the city of desolation. For a time, the people in the city of desolation were in a state of panic. They did not dare to loiter on the streets, afraid that they would be the next to become food. However, the chaos that Lu Fan had expected did not come. On the contrary, the people in the city had calmed down. Lu Fan was extremely surprised by this fact. How did this happen? Azure was very satisfied with this result. Everyone had the instinct to avoid risks. If the legendary man-eating flower didn't have such a strong background, the people here might not be so afraid. But now, the result was that everyone who knew the identity of the man-eating flower was all honest. In fact, so what if they were dishonest? Was he really going against the City Lord's mansion? What if the City Lord's mansion released man-eating flowers and ate them all? He couldn't afford to offend a man-eating flower with a background. Moreover, the City of Desolation was closed. It would not be easy for them to leave. Furthermore, if they really went out, they would not have a good life in the divine world. When their enemies came to seek revenge, they would probably die even faster. In that case, it was better to stay in the City of Desolation. At least, if the man-eating flower wanted to eat them, it was definitely not something that could be done in a short time. With this thought in mind, the people in the City of Abandoned Ruins were calm, and their performance made Song quite satisfied. After that, the City Lord's manor announced to the public that they would not let the man-eating flowers eat people in the future, and asked them to live here without worry. Chapter 29:31. Clue 2. Once this news was released, everyone in the city was excited. That's great, I'm finally alive. This was definitely good news for them. After a few days of silence, the City of the Abandoned Ruins became lively again. The arena tournament started again, and the rules were changed. This time, Lung Ruoxue and the others did not participate. Everyone entered a short period of adjustment. On this day, the burly man, who had been invited by the City Lord's mansion and had not returned for several days, came to the City Lord's mansion sneakily and asked to see Uncle Long. The guard invited them in. When he saw the burly man in the living room, he carefully observed the surroundings. Seeing that there was no one from the City Lord's mansion watching, he asked in a low voice, "Brother, how did you get caught in the City Lord's mansion?" He had only found out about this the day before yesterday, and had hesitated for a long time. In the end, he had mustered up the courage to visit. Before he came, he had also imagined that Uncle Long and the others might have been interrogated by torture. But after seeing Uncle Long and the others today, he suddenly realized that they seemed to be living quite a comfortable life. They were all white and fat. They didn't look like they were being tortured. However, he didn't think it was right to say that they were warmly received by the City Lord's mansion. Who said we were caught? We were invited here. Uncle Long raised his eyebrows. Brother. Don't hide it from me. My boss said that the City Lord hates you to death, so how could he invite you here? So you have to be careful. The City Lord is very narrow-minded. Be careful of his revenge. The burly man said with a worried expression. Thank you for your concern, but he won't have the chance to take revenge. Uncle Long said with a smile. Why? Blinking his eyes, the burly man didn't understand. The City Lord you mentioned is already dead. Uncle Long said with a smile. The burly man's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. How was this possible? How did the City Lord die? Why didn't they receive the news? No, this can't be true. Brother, don't tease me. I'm not a 3-year-old child. How can I believe this? After a moment of silence, the burly man said, I'm not teasing you. Your previous master is really dead. Otherwise, do you think we could be so carefree in the City Lord's mansion? Uncle Long said indifferently. Then who is the current city master? The burly man asked as he swallowed his saliva in shock. It's me. A voice came from outside, but the burly man did not see the person who spoke. Damn it. Where are you looking at? Lower your head. After Azure entered, he impatiently shouted. The burly man was very obedient. He looked down and saw nothing but a rabbit. What did she want him to look at? Idiot. Seeing that the burly man was still at a loss, Song said in disdain. He was being scolded. He was actually scolded by a rabbit. The burly man was confused. Since when were the rabbits in the City of Abandoned Ruins so tough? This didn't make sense. The burly man was secretly worried. At this time, Song said, I am the City Lord. Thanks you. These 4 words petrified the burly man. When did this happen? The position of the City Lord had actually fallen on the head of a rabbit. Where was the reverent god of the city lord's mansion? Did they all die? Sob. Could it be that they had to listen to this rabbit in the future? After he came back to his senses, he looked at the snow-white rabbit in front of him and felt a little helpless. Go and gather all the major forces. Seeing that the burly man was still in a daze, Azure directly ordered, You want me to gather them? The burly man pointed at himself and said in disbelief, What else? Azure asked. Then what should I say? The burly man's ability to accept things was unusually strong. Although the fact that he had to listen to a rabbit in the future made him very depressed, he felt that it didn't matter who he listened to. Since this rabbit could become the lord of a city, it must have its own extraordinary qualities. He just didn't know where he had passed. However, he believed that as long as he asked his brothers later, he would definitely know. The burly man's thoughts were very beautiful, and there were a few older brothers present, so he was very cooperative with each song's words, and put on an appearance of humbly seeking advice. Just say that the city lord has invited you. However, you are not allowed to reveal my identity. Azure said directly. All right, I got it. The burly man replied. Then, he turned around and left without chatting with Uncle Long and the others. Does Senior Tsong intend to subdue the forces here? Uncle Long asked with a faint smile after the burly man left. I'm not subduing them, I'm meeting them. Azure said with a smile. The various forces here were originally attached to the city lord's mansion. Now that the city lord's mansion had changed hands, they had to be informed. Since the errand boy had come to the door, it would save them the trouble of the city lord's guards passing on the message. Song understood the principle of making the best use of everything. Although the burly man looked a little silly, he was reliable. After informing the various forces, he returned to his own force to inform the boss. A few hours later, the representatives of the forces in the City of Desolation who had received the notice arrived one after another. Lu Fan was in charge of receiving them. With a reverent god personally coming forward, the representatives of the various forces were simply a little terrified. This reception standard was really too high. However, Lu Fan remained calm. Most importantly, after the new master had arrived, his hidden desire to see the world in chaos had suddenly emerged. Therefore, he really wanted to see the reactions of the representatives when they saw the new master. They had already predicted what might happen. So, how could he not be there to watch? However, his appearance made the representatives quite nervous. In the past, they were not so nervous when they saw the city lord. However, when they saw Lu Fan, they felt very uneasy. Lu Fan was too low-key in the city lord's mansion and ignored everything. It could be said that among the 4 reverent gods in the city lord's mansion, they had seen Lu Fan the least. Now that they suddenly saw Sir Lu Fan smiling at them, they were really not used to it. Especially the burly man, he already knew that the city lord had changed, and the previous city lord had died. When he first found out about this, he didn't understand why a rabbit had become the city lord. Now he was even more confused. At that time, he had thought that all the hierarch in the city lord's mansion had died. Now that he had seen the legendary Lu Fan, he felt a deep pain in his ass. Why is Sir Lu Fan still alive, but the city lord is a rabbit? All this time, the rabbit had only been food in everyone's impression. Now the food had become the city lord, and they had to listen to the food in the future. No matter how they thought about it, this was unbelievable. In a while, when the major forces learned of this news, one could imagine how shocked they were. The burly man simply couldn't imagine that terrifying scene. Woo. The scene would be too beautiful, and he didn't dare to look at it directly. Just as the burly man had expected, when Song Yi appeared, all the representatives were stunned. However, Lu Fan hadn't introduced Song at that time, so the representatives thought that the city lord's mansion was treating them to rabbit meat. Chapter 2932. Clue 3. Immediately, someone with a quick mouth laughed and teased. Sir Lu Fan, does the city lord want to treat us to rabbit meat? How do I eat it? Was it roasted or boiled? Oh, I personally prefer barbecued food. Lu Fan fell silent. He also knew that his master's image would cause people to misunderstand, but what he did not expect was that he was still sitting here, and someone dared to humiliate his master. Did they think he was dead? As for the burly man, he was so scared that his little heart was trembling. Hey, that rabbit wasn't meant to be eaten, it was the new city lord. However, the two evil-minded people did not say anything about this. The burly man even silently moved his chair to the door to avoid being caught in the crossfire later. You want to eat me? At this time, Song jumped onto the table in front of the person who spoke, and his bright black eyes looked straight at him. Aren't rabbits supposed to be eaten? The man was stunned for a moment before he said matter-of-factly. Obviously, he didn't expect the rabbit in front of him to actually be able to speak. It should be known that rabbits were the lowest level of beasts, and not many could speak. Yes, but in my eyes, you're also for eating, Song said as he grinned. What did you just say? When the person who spoke heard Song's words, he slammed the table in anger and stood up, glaring at Song. Song was neither angry nor annoyed. He floated in the air and looked at the other person. Then his small claws smacked the other person's bright big head. In an instant, 5 claw marks appeared on the person's head, and blood instantly flowed out. After being clawed, the man was dumbfounded. Don't you know that trouble comes from the mouth? This is just a small punishment for you. If you dare to eat rabbits again, I'll let the rabbits eat you too, Song threatened. After that, it turned its gaze to the other people present and said with a faint smile, I'm the new city lord of the City of Desolation. Be good or you'll regret it. Shocking. It was extremely shocking. Song's words petrified most of the people. Their eyes were wide open and their mouths were half open, unable to return to their senses for a long time. This is impossible. After a long time, someone shouted and turned to Lu Fan for confirmation. Lu Fan turned his head. His master had told him to speak less. Nothing is impossible. In the future, I'll be in charge here. You guys have to be obedient, Azure said unhappily. He was really bold. There was actually someone who dared to question its words. Humph. He could not be forgiven. Azure was furious. You want us to listen to a rabbit? Keep dreaming. The protesters continued to shout, clearly disagreeing with Song's words. If you don't listen, you will die, Azure said impolitely. When the person who spoke heard this, he actually laughed wildly. A rabbit told him to die if he didn't listen. This was really too interesting. But then he could no longer laugh. A white light flashed, and the man stopped breathing. The people present didn't even see what the white light was, and he was already dead. Who else wants to die? Report your name. Song's bright black eyes looked around at everyone present. When everyone was looked at by this gaze, especially when someone had died just now, they were all so scared that they didn't dare to make a sound. Did this rabbit kill someone in front of them? Everyone looked at Song, their hearts filled with shock. What's wrong? No one signed up. Seeing that no one said anything, Song asked again. My master is asking you a question. Why aren't you answering? Seeing that they were in a deadlock, Lu Fan interrupted. Master, what does that mean? Lu Fan's words made the representatives of the various forces even more horrified. They had never thought that Lu Fan would say such words. Was he trying to scare them to death? Master, are you referring to that rabbit? The crowd wasn't sure, but when they saw Lu Fan's serious expression, they didn't know what to do. What was going on? You exchanged a rabbit for City Lord Ji? To be honest, if Lu Fan became the City Lord, they could still accept it. But how could they accept a rabbit? As soon as they thought about how they would be led by a rabbit in the future, the people present felt a deep pain in their balls. However, this rabbit's strength seemed to be unfathomable, so for a moment, they didn't know how to deal with it. However, whether it was Song or Lu Fan, they had only gathered them to inform them and not to ask for their opinions. Therefore, it didn't matter whether they agreed or not. If they couldn't accept it, they could only die. Thanks, no one present dared to show any signs of disobedience to the message released by the man and beast. After learning that the former city lord was dead, they tactfully expressed their willingness to be loyal to him as before and left with their tails between their legs. After they left, the various factions started to secretly plot against the new city lord's estate. After all, they didn't want to work for a rabbit in the future. The representatives discussed for a long time, and finally came up with a perfect plan. One night a week later, They quietly surrounded the city lord's mansion and planned to launch a sneak attack. The representatives had already bribed a few guards of the city lord's mansion, so when they arrived late at night, the gate of the city lord's mansion was opened for them. After sneaking into the city lord's mansion under the cover of the night, they were just about to split up when the courtyard suddenly turned bright as day. The dazzling light almost blinded their dog eyes. All the forces were shocked. What was going on? He had been discovered. Just as they were feeling uneasy, Lung Ruoxue and the rest walked out from a room. When she saw them, Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly and pretended to be confused. What's going on? Are you visiting me in the middle of the night? None of the major factions said a word. They only looked at Lung Ruoxue and her group with a vexed expression. What? Are you all mute? Lung Ruoxue asked again, clearly provoking him. Fuck. You're the mute one. Your whole family is mute. It was unknown who it was, but someone shouted angrily. Lung Ruoxue squinted her beautiful eyes in displeasure. However, before she could make a move, a ray of white light flew towards the direction of the sound. Following that, a blood-curdling scream was heard as a person fell to the ground. Niu kill, by Guang, also known as Tsang, said as he landed in Lung Ruoxue's arms. Let the guards of the city lord's mansion take action. Well, just be the audience. Lung Ruoxue said calmly. Yes, they are too weak. They should practice. Song nodded in agreement and gave Lu Fan a look. Lu Fan understood. In an instant, guards appeared out of nowhere and surrounded the various forces. In terms of numbers, the various forces clearly had the advantage. However, in terms of aura, they could not compare to the guards of the city lord's mansion who had been undergoing devilish training for the past few days. Moreover, the other party had an extremely powerful reverent god-level expert, while the strongest person on the other side was a divine emperor. Such a difference in strength made them, who had planned to launch a surprise attack, feel deeply depressed. More importantly, the other party had disrupted all of their plans and caused them to be in a mess. Then the two sides started to fight. The guards of the city lord's mansion, who had been tortured for several days, all went to find the people of the major forces like vicious wolves. They vented their grievances that had been suppressed for several days on these people who had come to die. As for the various forces who had not expected that the city lord's mansion's combat power and aura would increase by a large margin, they were now in a complete tragedy. Not long after, more than half of the people on the various forces' side had fallen, while the other half had also suffered injuries of varying degrees. The final result was a crushing defeat for the allied forces. After they became captives, Lung Ruoxue and the others did not intend to kill them. Instead, they gave them a chance to make a contribution. This opportunity was naturally to find someone. Lung Ruoxue needed them to provide clues. When the various factions heard that they would not have to die if they could provide information on the three phoenixes, they immediately expressed that they would work hard to complete the mission. At the same time, Lung Ruoxue also ordered the city lord to post a reward notice. In an instant, the entire city of abandoned ruins was in action. Half a month later, in the living room of the city lord's mansion, Uncle Long looked at the calm Lung Ruoxue and couldn't help but ask, Schwer, it's been half a month and there's no clue at all. Could they have already left? I don't think so. Lung Ruoxue guessed. Then will our big actions reach the ears of the Ripple Mist bitch? Uncle Long was a little worried. It's possible. However, I'm not afraid to let her know. Lung Ruoxue said confidently. She didn't think that Ripple would come all the way to the abandoned city just for 3 phoenixes. That woman was so confident that she didn't care about the 3 phoenixes at all. Hearing Shue'er's words, what else could Uncle Long say? Suddenly, Lung Ruoxue stood up and said to the demon, Uncle Long and the rest. Green Vessel said that there's a lead. Hearing this, the few of them were overjoyed and quickly left the city lord's mansion with Shue'er, heading towards the location of the clue. The more they walked, the more they felt that something was amiss. Shue'er, our house is just ahead. Uncle Long was speechless. I know, but Qingju said that the aura of the Phoenix clan was leaked not far from where we used to live. Lung Ruoxue replied honestly. All this time, she had asked Qingju to pay close attention to the situation in the city of Forsaken Ruins. Before this, Qingju's focus was on the city lord's mansion. After knowing that the previous city lord had not caught Feng Miao and the other two, she had asked Qingju to expand the scope of his attention. However, she did not know where Feng Miao and the other two were hiding. Qingju and Sung had searched for them, but could not find any clues. This time, if Qingju had not discovered a trace of the Phoenix clan's aura, they would not have found it. However, according to Qingju, the aura disappeared as quickly as it came, so he could not determine its exact location. However, there was no doubt that the three old phoenixes were still in the city of forsaken ruins. Just like that, Lung Ruoxue and the rest walked in circles around the entrance of the house. Chapter 2933. Don't look down on me, alright? 1. After searching for a long time, everyone found nothing. However, Lung Ruoxue did not give up. Hence, after a discussion, they decided to stay here temporarily. After the news reached the city lord's mansion, Lu Fan immediately rushed over and looked at Lung Ruoxue and the others with a bitter expression. However, his resentful expression was ignored by everyone present. Lu Fan was very worried. He could only leave resentfully, looking back 3 times with every step he took. After living in the suburbs, Lung Ruoxue and the rest seemed to have nothing to do every day. However, all of them were using their divine senses to check for suspicious people. At present, there were fewer people living in the suburbs than when they had first arrived. It was said that those who had less people had moved to the city, and they had only moved away in a hurry after the rumor of the man-eating flower had spread. After all, this place was too remote. If something really happened, he was afraid that he would not be able to find anyone to save him. When Lung Ruoxue found out that this was the reason for the sharp drop in the number of people here, she had mixed feelings. She couldn't understand. The suburbs were dangerous, but would it be safe to move to the city? Don't forget, the man-eating flower was in the city lord's mansion. In her opinion, moving to the city would be more convenient for the man-eating flower to eat. Later, after a burly man who tried to please them explained, she finally understood that the people who had moved to the city had joined various forces in order to seek shelter. Those people felt that they would be safe once they joined the city of abandoned ruins. But Lung Ruoxue could not help but complain. If Zong had not destroyed the city lord, and the blood cherry blossom tree had not fallen under their control, all the people in the city of abandoned ruins would have become the blood cherry blossom tree's backup food. Those forces would have been nothing more than granaries. However, there were benefits to those people leaving. Their departure had reduced the difficulty of their investigation. Currently, there were more than 30 households living here. After a few days of patient observation, Lung Ruoxue and the rest had already eliminated 32 households that were not suspicious. There were still 5 households that were the main targets of their observation, and were under close surveillance. Very quickly, the information of these 5 families was placed in front of Lung Ruoxue and the rest. Among these 5 families, there was the man who had struck up a conversation with Uncle Long and the others. The members of the other families were also very simple. They did not have many family members. Hence, after discussing with Uncle Long and the others, Lung Ruoxue decided to get in touch with these families. After splitting up, Lung Ruoxue and the rest went their separate ways. She and the demon were in the same team, and their target was the family of 3. As neighbors, it was proper for them to visit each other. However, when the family of 3 saw Lung Ruoxue and the demon, they were obviously a little uneasy. In the city of abandoned ruins, neighbors rarely visited each other. Therefore, they were nervous when Lung Ruoxue and the demon came to visit. Lung Ruoxue only needed a single glance to know the strength of this family of 3. The male master was at the peak of the God King stage while the female master should have just advanced to the God King stage not long ago. As for their only son, he was currently only a god. After sitting down, Lung Ruoxue went straight to the point. We're here to ask about some things. What's the situation? The man asked cautiously. He knew that the man and woman had only been in the city of forsaken ruins for a short time. But the woman was very famous. He believed that if they really wanted to find out more, they could ask anyone in the city, and someone would be willing to tell them. So he could not understand why the woman would look for him. I heard that 3 phoenixes came to the city of abandoned ruins a while ago. Do you know where they are? Lung Ruoxue asked with a smile. Phoenix? Why would such a noble beast come to the city of abandoned ruins? The male owner had obviously never heard of this, and asked with a suspicious look. You guys haven't heard of it? Lung Ruoxue continued to ask, feeling a little disappointed. Thanks, no, I haven't. There won't be any high-level beasts here, trust me. Seeing that Lung Ruoxue was only asking about this, the male owner's mood relaxed quite a bit. Hearing this, Lung Ruoxue was even more disappointed because she knew that this man was speaking the truth. When the other party answered the question, his eyes did not flash. Although there was doubt, he did not feel guilty. On the other hand, the mother and son were only at a loss. On top of that, when Lung Ruoxue was asking them questions, Qingju had also taken the opportunity to read the family's memories. He confirmed that they had never heard of the 3 phoenixes. With that, the family of 3 was cleared of all suspicion. After Lung Ruoxue and the demon left this house, they headed straight to the next one. Of course, the purpose of going to the next house was naturally to let Green Vessel read the other party's memory. They went to 3 families in a row. After Qingju confirmed it, these 3 families no longer had any suspicion of being in contact with Feng Miao, and their scope of investigation became smaller and smaller. There were still 2 families that had not been verified by Qingju. One of them was a pair of siblings, and the other was the man who had hit on Uncle Long. They first went to the house of the brother and sister. After knocking on the door, a woman opened the door angrily and asked, "Who? We have a friend at your house. We want to find him. Can we go in?" Lung Ruoxue asked with a smile. "You guys are together?" The woman asked unhappily. However, before Lung Ruoxue could reply, she left Lung Ruoxue and the others behind and turned to leave. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxue and the others exchanged glances before following her in. Although they did not understand why this woman's attitude was so bad, it was only when they were face to face that it would be convenient for Green Vessel to read each other's memories. Therefore, even if they were treated coldly, they had to thicken their skin and follow. Walking into the living room, the atmosphere was not very good. Minga sat on the chair with a dark face, and the other man was also glaring at her with a red face. No one knew what had happened between them. As soon as she saw Lung Ruoxue and the others, Mingji pounced over as if she had seen her savior. She hugged the demon's arm and cried, "Ooh, boss, help! What's wrong?" The demon frowned and unceremoniously pulled his arm away. He even patted his sleeve in disgust, as if it was stained with something dirty. Seeing this, Ming's heart was filled with sorrow. He felt that he had been hurt. Fortunately, the demon did not know what he was thinking. Otherwise, he would have wanted to hurt him even more. "Did someone bully you?" Lung Ruoxue asked. "There are." Mingji nodded her head vigorously and looked at Lung Ruoxue with a gratified expression. "Damn it, who bullied you? You took advantage of my sister. Don't you want to take responsibility?" When he heard that Minga was being bullied, the other man in the hall immediately shouted in dissatisfaction. His words caused Lung Ruoxue and the others to widen their eyes in surprise. They looked at the woman who was standing beside the man with a shy expression on her face. They really wanted to ask, who was this? The woman's face was red, and her eyes were watery. She looked like a completely different person from when she was angry just now. However, Lung Ruoxue and the others still couldn't imagine how Mingji could take advantage of her. Chapter 2934. Don't look down on me, alright? 2. It should be known that the woman was tall and strong, and there was no feminine charm on her body. As the city lord of the 9 Nether prison, what kind of woman had Mingji not seen? So, they couldn't imagine how Mingji could possibly take advantage of that woman. Could it be that he had seen too many beautiful women, and wanted to change his taste? But wasn't this change of taste a little too much? The crowd couldn't accept it for a moment, and they all turned to look at Ming Song with strange expressions. Minga didn't even need to guess to know what these bad guys were thinking, so he quickly explained, "I didn't take advantage of her. I just accidentally touched her hand, and the siblings forced me to take responsibility." As he said this, Minga was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. And these people even doubted his innocence. Boo, what a sad bird. He had to take responsibility just because they touched this matter. Lung Ruoxue and the rest were especially speechless when they heard this. Was your sister's hand very precious? Why do I have to take responsibility for accidentally touching it? What's wrong with making you take responsibility? I'm looking up to you by asking you to take responsibility. The man shouted at Minga. Please don't look down on me, okay? Ming Ji was depressed to death, but this man thought that the reason he could marry his sister was because of his cultivation in his previous life. What the hell is this? No. You have to give us an explanation for this. The man shouted loudly. What kind of explanation do you want? How do you want him to take responsibility? Lung Ruoxue pointed at Ming Ji as she asked the man. This pair of siblings looked very similar. The elder brother was also a strong guy, but his temper was not very good. Meanwhile, Lung Ruoxue had also learned some things from Qingju. At the same time, she eliminated the possibility that he knew the whereabouts of the three phoenixes. However, Ming Ji's matter was a little troublesome. It was obvious that the woman wanted to cling to Ming Ji. Even if Ming Ji had not done anything at all, the so-called touch was just a deliberate touch when the woman handed Ming Ji the tea. His purpose, of course, was to make Ming Ji take responsibility. The reason was simple. The little sister, who had been ignored all this time, had taken a fancy to Ming Ji. As an elder brother, he naturally had to cooperate fully. The brother and sister were used to being barbaric, and could be considered as tyrants in the outskirts of the city of abandoned ruins. Therefore, if they wanted to settle this matter, they had to be tougher. Otherwise, they were afraid that there would be no end to the argument. Lung Ruoxue didn't want to waste her time on unimportant people or things. It's impossible for Ming Ji to marry your sister, Lung Ruoxue said. Why not? Which part of my sister isn't good enough for him? When the man heard this, his anger grew even more. It's not a matter of whether he's worthy or not. Minga doesn't like him at all. Do you want the tyrant to force himself on him? What good would that do to your sister? Lung Ruoxue said helplessly. She could tell that this was a rather stubborn man. He was also a persistent man who had always wanted to marry his sister off. I don't care. He took advantage of my sister, so he has to take responsibility. The man said unreasonably. You have to take responsibility after touching me. What kind of logic is this? Lung Ruoxue was truly speechless. Just how afraid was he that her younger sister would not be able to get married? Don't you know that men and women shouldn't touch each other? The man reminded. All right. But as far as I know, it was your sister who touched Ming Ji. What about that? Lung Ruoxue asked. From what you know. You weren't there at the time, so how could you know? When the man heard Lung Ruoxue's words, he snorted. Thanks, you mean Ming Ji has no witnesses? Lung Ruoxue blinked her eyes and asked again. Not bad. The man nodded proudly. What if I say that I can read minds? I know everything about you and your sister, including what you're thinking now. Lung Ruoxue said calmly. This is impossible. The man didn't believe it at all. What you're thinking now is that no matter what, you must get your sister married. You can't let go of Ming Ji, this rich son-in-law. If we don't agree, then you're planning to make this matter known to everyone so that the public can condemn us, right? Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly. You. The man was shocked by Lung Ruoxue's words. He pointed at Lung Ruoxue, unable to complete his sentence. Your sister is thinking that we can't let go of this opportunity. We must hold on to Ming Ji. Lung Ruoxue glanced at the man who was at a loss for words, then looked at his sister. Hearing this, the younger sister's expression changed slightly. She then looked at Lung Ruoxue unhappily and roared. What are you talking about? He should be the one taking responsibility. All right, I don't have time to waste on you siblings. I only have one thing to say. Don't covet people you can't afford to offend. You must know your own limits. Lung Ruoxue sneered. She really had no more patience. Originally, she had wanted to talk things out and make the siblings give up on this idea, but now that she saw that her younger sister was still so stubborn, she deeply felt that she had to cut the Gordian knot and end the battle as soon as possible. After she finished speaking, Lung Ruoxue gave the evil demon and the rest a look. They understood and walked out. The moment the woman saw this, she immediately stood in front of Lung Ruoxue and the rest and shouted at the top of her voice. "Don't leave. Move," he shouted. Lung Ruoxue said unhappily. "I want tea. Unless he's willing to marry me." The woman insisted. "I won't marry you," Minga said directly without even looking at the woman. You, the woman was greatly shocked. Ming Ji had never said such harsh words to her before. At that time, she had thought that Ming Ji was interested in her, but who knew? The woman felt her heart break. Was it easy for her to fall for someone? Why did he do this to her? What about me? Get out of my way, don't block our way. In fact, although he wasn't very gentle to women, he rarely said such words directly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried to reason with her. But now he was really forced to lose his patience. This woman not only couldn't read other people's expressions, she was also extremely thick-skinned. "You want us to take action?" After Ming Ji finished speaking, Lung Ruoxue turned to look at the man and said. The man revealed a constipated expression and was a little undecided. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxue smiled indifferently. "If you provoke us, that good brother of yours won't be able to help you. You might even bring trouble to him. You guys can leave," the man helplessly said as he heavily exhaled. He knew who Lung Ruoxue was talking about, and the strength of Lung Ruoxue and the others. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used this opportunity to cling on to them. But it was obvious that these people were not people that the two of them could afford to offend. He could only blame himself for being blinded by greed and almost getting himself killed. Thinking of this, the man broke out in a cold sweat. "Brother, you can't let them go," the woman hurriedly said. "Shut up," the man roared angrily, and the woman immediately didn't dare to make a sound. If even her brother didn't want to help her, she wouldn't dare to pester him anymore. Chapter 29:35. Don't look down on me, alright? 3. Seeing that the siblings were finally tactful, Lung Ruoxue and the rest did not make things difficult for them. They walked around the dumbfounded woman and left. As they walked out of the siblings' house, Ming Ji kept grumbling to Lung Ruoxue and the others about his grievances, which made everyone happy. Soon, they arrived at the house of the last man. Uncle Long was in charge of that man, and at that moment, Uncle Long was fighting with him. It wasn't that the man was smart or quick-witted, but he was obviously a bit difficult to deal with. He didn't answer Uncle Long's questions directly, which wasted a lot of Uncle Long's time. He didn't get any useful information. The only thing Uncle Long knew was that the man had never seen or heard of a phoenix. However, Uncle Long had already received Shui Air's voice transmission, and knew that the other 4 Shui Airs had confirmed that they were no longer suspicious. As such, the man in front of him was the most suspicious person. At this moment, Uncle Long was casually chatting with him. When Lung Ruoxue and the rest arrived, they sat in the living room of the man's house and stared at each other. When they had just entered, the man had already told Lung Ruoxue that he had not even seen a single phoenix feather before. After sitting for a while, Lung Ruoxue received a message from Green Vessel. "Sister, I can't read this man's memory." "Why can't I read it?" Lung Ruoxue asked in confusion. "I suspect that he has a divine weapon that can block my mind reading." Qingju guessed. "There's such a divine weapon?" Lung Ruoxue was a little surprised. This was the first time she had heard of such a divine weapon. Yes. In the past, the old master liked to make some messy things, so he once made a divine artifact that could block people from reading their minds. However, that divine artifact was very useless. Other than preventing people from reading their minds, it had no other use. Back then, the old master also made it for fun. After he finished, he seemed to have given it away. As for who he gave it to, I can't remember clearly. Qingju said honestly. "What do we do now?" Lung Ruoxue was out of ideas. Initially, he thought that Qingju would be able to help if the man refused to cooperate. Now Qingju had no other way. Moreover, the man's mouth was shut more tightly than the clamshell. Was there any way to pry his mouth open? Lung Ruoxue glanced at the man and saw that he was calm and composed. She knew that this man was not an ordinary person to deal with. There's no other way. Unless we reveal our identity, the premise is that they must be interested in or afraid of our identity. Otherwise, we can forget about it. Qingju said helplessly. Leng Ruoxue felt even more helpless. Revealing her identity was the last resort. She wasn't so narcissistic that she thought that once she said her name, people would immediately tell her what she wanted to know. But now she really didn't know what to do. Why don't we just wait here? Let's see who can outlast who? Leng Ruoxue, who couldn't think of any good ideas, decided to stay here rather calmly. Of course, this wasn't the best plan. It was a more shameless way of doing things. The man could tell as well. At first, he was quite calm, but as time went on, especially when it was late at night and the neighbors in front of him still didn't have any intention of leaving, he felt a little annoyed. It's getting late. After thinking for a long time, the man reminded. Yes. Leng Ruoxue nodded her head to show that she understood. However, none of them had any intention of leaving. They continued to sit there like old monks in meditation. Swear, I'm hungry. Uncle Long said pitifully. When she heard Uncle Long say that he was hungry, Leng Ruoxue quickly took out a pile of food from her bracelet. Then, the few of them gathered together and started eating as if there was no one else around. When the man saw this scene, he was a little confused. What the hell is this? She was sitting in his living room and eating in front of him. Why didn't she treat him, the host? The dishes that the little girl had brought out were so fragrant that he was so envious that his appetite was about to burst out. However, she had completely ignored him as if he did not exist. This fact made the man deeply depressed. I say, you guys are just going to eat and drink in front of me? The man couldn't take it anymore and asked angrily. You want to eat? Leng Ruoxue blinked her beautiful eyes as she asked. Yes, I do. The man was very honest. Tell me where the 3 phoenixes are and I'll treat you to some. Leng Ruoxue stated her conditions. I really don't know. The man said helplessly. He felt depressed in his heart. Can you not be like this? This was bullying. Since you don't want to cooperate, I have no other choice. Leng Ruoxue's face was filled with regret. Then, she ignored the man's existence and turned around to eat. Everyone finished eating the food in front of the man and burped. They continued to stare at each other. Seeing them like this, the man really wanted to scratch the wall. How could they bully people like this? This was his home. The man glared at Leng Ruoxue and her group of people. However, Leng Ruoxue and her group had long been trained to be thick-skinned, so why would they care? Leng Ruoxue and the rest had decided to fight to the death with the man. Let's see who can last longer. Thanks. Several days later, the man was on the verge of a mental breakdown. These people's skin was already so thick that it was unimaginable. He had even opened his mouth to drive them away, but they refused to leave. The man was quite helpless about this outcome. What to do? They couldn't be driven away. He could not beat him. And these people always ate delicious food in front of him that he had never seen before, making him drool all over the ground, but they never invited him to eat. A bunch of bastards. The man who had been provoked to the point of stomping his feet was so hateful that he wanted to bite them a few times. They were really too hateful. The man admitted that he had lived for so long, but he had never seen such a rascal. What do you want? After 3 days, the man finally asked listlessly. We just want to know where the 3 phoenixes are. Leng Ruoxue said with a smile. Don't tell me you don't know. If you still say that, then we can only continue to stay here and stare at you. Leng Ruoxue added. You guys. You've really gone too far. If you don't want to leave, then I'll leave. The man roared. I'm afraid of you guys. We'll follow you wherever you go. Leng Ruoxue continued to be a scoundrel. Hearing this, the man was furious. I really admire your thick skin. The man sighed and said sincerely. Thank you for the compliment. Leng Ruoxue nodded, then looked at the man with a serious expression. She asked curiously. You look like this now, is it because you were poisoned? How did you know? The man was shocked. Although he looked a little old, even an alchemist couldn't tell that he had been poisoned. Now this woman had seen through it with a single sentence. How did she know? I guessed it. Your face is old, but your body is still tall and straight. You look young and healthy. I guess you forced the poison to your face. Are you afraid of being recognized? Lung Ruoxue continued to guess. This is none of your business. The man said indifferently, actually what I wanted to say is if you're willing, I can help you detoxify. Lung Ruoxue said honestly, I told you, I don't know where the phoenix is. The man looked at Lung Ruoxue and said, it's just an antidote. If you really don't want to tell me the whereabouts of the 3 phoenixes, I won't force you. Lung Ruoxue explained when she saw that the man had misunderstood her. Why? The man didn't understand. Before, he had indeed thought that this was the other party's condition, but he didn't expect that the woman in front of him would actually be willing to detoxify him unconditionally. Was this possible? More importantly, his poison wasn't that easy to cure. We've been sharing a room for a few days. It's only right for me to help you. Just treat it as paying for your accommodation. Lung Ruoxue smiled. However, the man clearly did not believe Lung Ruoxue's words so easily. He kept looking at Lung Ruoxue suspiciously. This is an antidote pill, eat it. To show her sincerity, Lung Ruoxue took out a blue pill and handed it over. Normal antidotes can't cure my poison, the man replied honestly. This isn't an ordinary antidote. What, you don't dare to eat it? Are you afraid that it'll poison you too? Lung Ruoxue provoked him on purpose. I'm not afraid. The man knew that she was trying to goad him into action, but he didn't want to be looked down upon by a woman. So he reached out to take the pill and swallowed it. Not long after, the man clearly felt a burning pain in his stomach. In the end, he couldn't stand the pain anymore. He directly covered his stomach and rolled from the chair to the ground. He was in so much pain that he started rolling. The man was very tough. Although he was in pain, he clenched his teeth without making a sound. Sweat slid down his forehead, and soon his face was as pale as paper, and his eyes were unfocused. He, Uncle Long, who had a good impression of the man, was worried. It's fine, Uncle Long. Please help me bring him back to his room. Lung Ruoxue gave Uncle Long a comforting look. Hearing this, Uncle Long quickly carried the man back to his room. Lung Ruoxue and the rest were still waiting in the living room. After a few hours, the man finally ended his painful torture and walked out of the room. At this time, his face no longer had the old look he had before. Although he could not be considered handsome, he was quite elegant. However, after a few hours of torture, he looked a little weak. What kind of antidote is this? Why does it hurt so much? The man could not help but ask Lung Ruoxue the moment they came out. That's right, because what I gave you wasn't an antidote pill but poison. Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. You. Upon hearing this, the man's face turned even paler. He glared at Lung Ruoxue in disbelief. The hatred in his heart. He knew that this woman was up to no good. Now he had been tricked again. However, he didn't know what kind of poison he had been poisoned with, because he couldn't feel any discomfort in his body at all, except that he was a little weak. Chapter 2936. The twins won. However, no one would be in a good mood when they heard that they were poisoned again. The man glared at Lung Ruoxue for a long time with complicated feelings. He did not say anything. After a moment, Lung Ruoxue smiled and said, Don't worry, your poison has already been detoxified. Don't you feel that your body is in great condition now? Of course, if you insist on thinking that you've been poisoned by another type of poison, I have no objections. Lung Ruoxue's infuriating words left the man speechless. He continued to glare at Lung Ruoxue. After a long time, he finally said, I'm really not poisoned? If I say no, would you believe me? Lung Ruoxue blinked her eyes and asked with a smirk, Can you not believe me? The man was furious. Having lived for so many years, he had seen all kinds of people, but this was the first time he had seen someone as infuriating as the woman in front of him. At this moment, Dongfangyu stood up and shook his head helplessly. Swear, don't scare him. We're old friends. Hearing Dongfangyu's words, Lung Ruoxue couldn't help but raise her brows. The man also looked at Dongfangyu in surprise and asked, Old friend? Do we know each other? When the man asked this, he was still sizing up Dongfangyu. He couldn't tell that this ordinary-looking, even somewhat ugly, fellow was someone he knew. Guardian Wing im Dongfongyue. Dongfengyu sighed. Dongfengyue? The missing Dongfengyue? The man, also known as Wei Yi, turned pale with fright and sized him up even more seriously. You're the one who's missing. Dongfeng was getting angrier. Do you have any proof that you're Dongfengyu? Wei Yi ignored Dongfengyu's rage and continued to ask. The suspicion on his face only increased. Do you need evidence? Dongfengyu was speechless. Could it be that someone would dare to impersonate him? Or did this guy meet a fake Dongfengyu? Of course I do. Because the Dongfengyu I know doesn't look like you at all. Besides, your temperament is very different from the Dongfengyu I know. So I have enough reason to suspect that you're lying to me unless you have evidence. Wei Yi looked at Dongfengyu with a face full of vigilance. At the same time, he felt a little regretful. If he had known that he would be recognized, he would have dressed up properly. He had been too careless. He had never thought that after so many years, there would still be people who remembered his existence. Could it be that they were on someone's side? If that was the case, then they would be in big trouble. Wei Yi had a headache. What should he do in this situation? Self-defense or counterattack? Looking at Lung Ruoxue, Wei Yi's heart was at a loss. Although the other party had given him poison, it had indeed cured him of the poison. As for whether there would be any residual effects, he couldn't determine at the moment. Naturally, he couldn't decide what attitude he should have towards these people in front of him. Especially when someone among them recognized him. Although that person called himself Dongfengyu, it was clearly not an easy task to persuade him. Lung Ruoxue could tell what the other party was thinking. She smiled faintly and said, He is indeed Dongfengyu. As for why he is different from the people you know, it's simple. He has changed his appearance. Really? Then remove your disguise and let me see. Hearing this, Wei Yi requested. All right. However, you'll have to wait for more than a month. Lung Ruoxue replied honestly. Why? You guys aren't thinking of buying time, are you? Hearing Lung Ruoxue's words, Wei Yi's suspicions deepened, and he looked at Lung Ruoxue and the others with a face of disbelief. Thanks, of course not. There's a time limit to the disguise pill we took, and we still need to have topping to recover our original looks. Lung Ruoxue explained. You guys? You've all changed your appearances? Wei Yi caught the sensitive words in Lung Ruoxue's words and asked. Yes, I am. Lung Ruoxue nodded. No wonder. However, don't you have an antidote for that face-changing pill? Wei Yi continued to be suspicious. There is. However, this disguise pill is a bit special. Even if you have the antidote, you can only take it after 3 months, or else the antidote won't work. Lung Ruoxue said honestly. Who knew that when she said this, the distrust on Wei Yi's face would deepen. Shuer, don't talk nonsense with this old brat. Turn up the elder. Uncle Long couldn't help but interrupt. Lung Ruoxue was speechless. What did he mean by elder da? Uncle Long. First elder wasn't Woof Woof. However, she still obediently moved the great elder, who was refining in the bracelet, out. The Armament Guild's chief elder, who had suddenly been moved to another place, appeared with a blank expression. He held a piece of black ore in his hand and studied it. After a moment of confusion, the chief elder said dumbly, Where's my furnace? Girl, why didn't you say anything before you moved me out? I'm asking you to come out and be a witness. Lung Ruoxue wiped away the cold sweat on her forehead and hurriedly said, What kind of certificate? I'm busy. The head elder of the Armament Guild headquarters was a little displeased. Other people had a temper when they woke up, but he had a temper when refining armaments. Especially when he was interrupted while refining armaments, his temper was definitely on a nightmare level. Little Lulu? At this moment, the chief elder of the Craftsmen's Guild headquarters heard a soft call in disbelief. At the same time, Lung Ruoxue and the rest were sweating profusely because of these 3 words. Obviously, the other party was calling him the head elder of the Craftsmen's Guild, because he was the only one with the surname Lu among the people present. Hearing this long-lost pet name, the great elder of the Craftsmen's Guild suddenly burst into tears. He slowly turned his head in disbelief. Then he pounced on the guard wing and hugged him as he wailed. Woo, guild leader. I thought I would never see you again in this life. Hearing the great elder address the other party as president, Lung Ruoxua finally understood why Uncle Long had asked her to promote him as an elder. As expected, the great elder was more useful. Even without their nonsense, Wei had already taken the initiative to recognize her. Now the great elder was hugging Wei and crying while Wei was coaxing him with a gentle expression. This scene, no matter how Lung Ruoxua looked at it, made her feel like they were in love. After an unknown period of time, Wei, who could feel the burning gazes of the few people present, coaxed the great elder until he was almost done. He then looked at Lung Ruoxua and the rest in anger and shouted, "Have you seen enough? Don't worry about us, you guys continue." Lung Ruoxua put on an understanding expression. "Continue my ass." Lung Ruoxia's words made Wei go a little crazy. Which house did this brat come from? Why is he so annoying? Schwer, stop fooling around. This is our armament guild's guildmaster. He's the first. Seeing Schwer make fun of the guard division, which he regarded as his master, the great elder wiped his tears and hurriedly said, "The founding president of the Craftsmen's Guild?" Lung Ruoxua blinked her eyes and re-examined Wei. "I really couldn't tell. The City of Desolation was actually a place with crouching tigers and hidden dragons." Chapter 2937. The twins too, that's right. Little girl, what's your relationship with little Lulu? Wei nodded and then asked, "President, can you not call me that in front of this junior? Let's just call him little Lulu in private." The great elder, who was slow to react, requested. "Why?" Wei blinked his eyes. He clearly didn't think there was anything wrong with the name little Lulu. Ugh. The head elder was very depressed. Could he say that the name Little Lulu was an insult to his dignity as the head elder of the craftsmen's headquarters? Did he dare to say it? If he said it, with the president's bad taste, not only would he not change it, but he would also become worse. The great elder sighed. From a certain point of view, he had a nameless master, and was the same type of person as Schwer and the others. Great elder is embarrassed. Lung Ruoxua considerately answered First Elder's doubts when she saw that he was having a hard time explaining. This time, she made First Elder's face turn red. But at the same time, Lung Ruoxua had once again attracted the attention of the guard wing. "Oh, little Lulu makes me feel very close to him. And it also reminds me of little Lulu when he was young. He was so cute when he was young, and I've known him since he was still a little boy." Wei seemed to be reminiscing. As a result, the great elder wished he could find a hole to hide in. Oh, President. Could she not mention his childhood? However, it was clear that the people present were all very interested in the great elder's childhood. Their eyes were fixed on Wei, hoping that he would reveal more. However, Wei also knew when to stop, and didn't really expose the great elder as they had hoped. Then he asked again, "Little girl, you still haven't told me what your relationship with the great elder is." "The great elder is a good friend of my godfather. Schwer is my sugar daddy," the two of them said in unison. The two of them gave completely different answers, which completely confused Wei. Then he looked at the great elder in disappointment and said, "Little Lulu, you've fallen." The great elder was silent. Schwer was indeed his financial backer now, to provide him with all sorts of ores. Lung Ruoxua took the initiative to change the topic as she glanced at the silent First Elder. "Lord Wei, can you tell me the whereabouts of the three phoenixes?" "I don't know," Wei still said. Hearing this answer, Lung Ruoxua was so depressed that she wanted to scratch the wall. She had already called him an elder, but why was the other party's mouth still shut as tightly as a clamshell? "President, if you know, please tell Schwer." Seeing this, the First Elder said, "I don't know." Wei still said the same thing. "Wei, those three phoenixes are Schwer's beastie." Dongfeng Yu said, "What evidence do you have?" Wei asked indifferently, "You want evidence again?" Lung Ruoxua was going crazy. Why did this person need evidence for everything? "Your Excellency Wei, I am Lung Ruoxua." Seeing that the First Elder was no longer useful, Lung Ruoxua had no choice but to reveal her family name. "I've never heard of it." Wei's expression was as calm as ever. Alright. She wasn't a top-grade crystal, so she couldn't let everyone know about her. Thanks. After taking a few deep breaths, Lung Ruoxue continued. My master is master you. Evidence. Guardian Wing again. Lung Ruoxue was completely driven mad. Other than asking her to produce evidence, couldn't this fellow say anything else? The Great Elder can prove it. After being speechless for a while, Lung Ruoxue suppressed the urge to beat him up and gritted her teeth. Guildmaster, Schwer is really master, yes, disciple. The First Elder quickly said. Unfortunately, Wei didn't even believe his words. He just looked at them quietly. The Great Elder was helpless. He knew that the president's stubbornness had come up. It didn't matter who said it. In the end, they looked at each other and Uncle Long asked helplessly, what do we have to do for you to believe us? It's simple. Show me the evidence. Wei said casually. Even your own disciple can't? Uncle Long asked, speechless. We haven't seen each other for too long. The guard division's excitement from seeing the Great Elder had disappeared, and it was now abnormally rational. Guild leader, we're not working for that wretched person. You'll know once you leave the city of forsaken desolation. The Great Elder, who understood the Guardian Wing very well, said after some thought. I won't leave this place now. Wei was a bit stubborn. What exactly do you want? Lung Ruoxue was infuriated and roared. I only want evidence. The Guardian Wing won't turn back until it hits a wall. Girl, leave this guy to me. At this moment, Song, who had been napping in Lung Ruoxue's arms, opened his eyes and said, it had had enough. This person was really good at that. After speaking, Azure directly swept away Guardian Wing. Will the guild leader be all right? After Tsong and Wei disappeared, the Great Elder said nervously. He was afraid that Senior Tsong would hurt Wei in a fit of anger. It'll be fine. Lung Ruoxue gave the Grand Elder a consoling look, then asked him about the situation of the Guardian Wing. The Great Elder spilled everything that Lung Ruoxue wanted to know. He also found out from Lung Ruoxue that the Guardian Wing had been poisoned. In an instant, he became more and more nervous. Schwer, you have to help the president. He's a good person, but he's a little stubborn sometimes. First Elder pleaded. Don't worry. His poison has been cured. Lung Ruoxue replied honestly. When First Elder heard this, he immediately felt relieved. Then he requested Lung Ruoxue to send him back to the bracelet. After Wei was grabbed by the collar by a rabbit, the only feeling he had was depression, extreme depression. Not only was this rabbit strong, but it was also very fast. In the blink of an eye, Guard Wing didn't know where he was. Feeling the strong wind whistling past his ears, Wei adapted to it for a long time before he endured the pain on his face from the wind blades and asked, where is this place? Where are you taking me? He had never dreamed that a rabbit would have such strength. One had to know that he was a reverent god. Although his strength was relatively weak among reverent god-level cultivators, he was still much stronger than a rabbit. However, this rabbit today had greatly stimulated him. This rabbit was really too intrepid. He had started to teleport while carrying him without even panting. How could the hierarch bear this? If Uncle Long and the others weren't here, they would have comforted him. You'll be fine once you get used to it. However, on the way here, not to mention getting used to it, Wei simply didn't dare to look directly at the intrepid rabbit that was carrying him. Didn't you want evidence? I'll take you there. Azure coldly glanced at Wei and spoke truthfully. So we've already left the city of abandoned ruins. Wei was shocked. How much time had passed? He left the city. Moreover, he didn't even know how to get out of the city. This didn't make sense. Chapter 2938. The Twins 3, correct. I'm going to take you to the Imperial City now. Azure said indifferently. Imperial City? I'm not going there. Hearing this, Wei immediately refused. The mist was trying to catch him. He was not willing to walk right into a trap. But since Tsongdu had said so, would it be useful to refuse? Brat, this is not up to you. Azure said emotionlessly. From the moment you asked Neo for evidence, you were destined to take a trip to the Imperial City today. Although it wasn't wrong for Wei Yi to be more cautious, it was wrong that the person he was careful of was Lung Ruoxue. This had triggered Song's forbidden lamella, so Wei Yi was destined to be at Song's mercy. Don't want to? Are you dreaming? Why you're kidnapping me? Seeing how overbearing Azure was, Guard Wing couldn't help but shout. You're right. I'm kidnapped. What can you do to me? He then found a quiet place and threw the Guard Wing in his hand to the ground. Wei Yi didn't know what was going on. He thought that the rabbit had finally put him down obediently. Who knew that the next second, a white light flashed in front of his eyes, and then he felt a sharp pain in his body. He looked down and saw that there was a claw mark on his chest. Blood was still seeping out of the 5 small grooves. He was injured. Tens of thousands of years had passed. Other than being tortured by poison, the first time he was injured was by a rabbit. This reality greatly hurt Wei Yi's self-esteem. However, before he could react, a white light flashed in front of him in a dazzling manner. A more intense pain spread from his internal organs. Arg. It hurts. Stop scratching. Wei Yi covered his face and begged for mercy. This rabbit was really too wicked. After scratching its body, it specifically scratched its face. His face, which had been restored to its original appearance with great difficulty, was burning at this moment. It was even 100 times more painful than his body. This was the rhythm of disfigurement. Woo. Wei Yi was in tears. He was definitely going to be bullied by a rabbit today. He wanted to fight back, but this rabbit's aura was firmly suppressing him, causing him to be forced to endure it passively. Humph. This is just to teach you a lesson for doubting my girl. Azure sneered and stopped clawing. This guy didn't make any major mistakes, so just giving him a small lesson would do. The reason why he didn't do this in front of Nyo was because he was afraid that Nyo would be put in a difficult position. Who asked this guy to have a relationship with the great elder of the Craftsmen's Guild headquarters? It had to say nepotism. How annoying. After Blue stopped, Wei Yi saw that he was finally safe. He carefully looked at Blue's expression, and then took out a healing pill. After a while, the injuries on her body finally didn't hurt as much. However, his healing pills were only ordinary, so they only relieved the pain. His face and body were still covered in wounds. When Azure saw this, he immediately took out a supreme-grade healing pill and said to Wei Yi with a look of disdain, "Look at your poor appearance. You don't even have a decent healing pill. How do you survive?" She was being despised. Woo, this rabbit was really not likable. However, with the lesson learned, Guard Wing naturally wouldn't easily provoke Song. He silently took the pill and swallowed it. The injuries on his body and face were immediately healed. Other than the claw marks on his clothes, there was no other evidence that he had suffered inhuman abuse. From the looks of it, he was indeed worse than a rabbit. What kind of world is this? Why was it that even a rabbit was richer than him? One had to know that he was a blacksmith. He was one of the most top-notch god-grade artifact masters in the divine realm, but a certain rabbit had defeated him with a single healing medicinal pill. Yuzheng looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle. Wei Yi wanted to pretend that the rabbit in front of him didn't exist, but that was obviously impossible. After taking care of Guard Wing, Azure continued to teleport with him. Thanks, in less than 2 days, they arrived at Yu City. At the entrance of the Imperial City, Wei Yi hurriedly lowered his head, afraid that he would be recognized. Useless thing, you only have this little courage? I have a grudge against the Divine Master. It'll be finished if she finds out. Wei Yi said gloomily. I'm here. What are you afraid of? Song's face was filled with disapproval. He raised his head with difficulty and glanced at Song, but he was being held by Song's collar. He could only see the fluffy white fur on Song's body. No matter how strong you were still a rabbit. However, it didn't take long for this rabbit to open his eyes. Changing its color, Song swaggered to the city gate with Guard Wing. This was the first time the guards of the city had seen a human being carried by a beastie, so they laughed out loud without even asking. Their wild and unbridled laughter made Wei Yi want to find a hole to hide in. His reputation, all gone. However, he had disappeared for too long, and it seemed that these people had long forgotten who he was. Good. With this thought, Wei Yi's heart relaxed. Are you done laughing? Azure asked indifferently. Ha ha ha. This is so interesting. Little Rabbit, are you this person's master? One of the guards asked. Although they were called rabbits, Totoro, and cats, it had already been marked in their city. However, the rabbit in front of them was not white but gray, so the guard did not realize that this rabbit was equally dangerous. According to their thinking, white was white, and gray was gray. No one could change their colors as they wished. But Song could. It could change into whatever it wanted, which led to these people's tragic ending. However, at this moment, they did not realize it at all, and even laughed even more intensely. He's not my master, he's my captive. Azure replied calmly. Hearing this, Wei successfully revived himself. It was too embarrassing. He had become a captive. He wasn't captured by the mist, but he became a rabbit. Fortunately, these people did not know him. However, it was annoying enough that they could not stop laughing. However, with that rabbit around, the guard wing decided to be magnanimous and not argue with those guards. Otherwise, it would be too disgraceful. Captive? Ha ha ha. How useless must this person be to be taken as a captive by a rabbit? Someone asked while laughing. He's not trash. It was a pity that Song Dao's words were not convincing. Hearing this, the guards laughed even louder. After a long time, a guard who laughed so hard that tears came out of his eyes asked, Little Rabbit, are you guys planning to enter the city? Nonsense. If we don't enter the city, who would come here? I'm sorry, Song Wuji said calmly as he glanced at the other party like a fool. You. The guard choked and was so angry that he almost choked. Then he shouted, You can enter after paying the entrance fee. City entrance fee? This lord never pays a fee when entering the city. Song waved his claws and said domineeringly. Of course, the main reason was that he had no money. If you don't pay the entrance fee, you're forbidden from entering. The guard roared. This is not up to you. I advise you to let me in if you know what's good for you. I won't make things difficult for you. I just want to go in and find someone, but if you insist on collecting the city fee from me, then I can only. Azure deliberately left out half of his words. Chapter 2939. The twins 4. The guard was fooled and asked with a glare. Can only what? You want to know? Azure smiled evilly. The guard nodded dumbly. Watch carefully. Azure warned, and then a small claw slightly raised, and a faint divine power light blade flew out, smashing on the city wall. As the light blade was too small, even thinner than a strand of hair, the city wall was still intact after it hit the wall. The guard was amused by this scene. Haha. Do you think you're that rabbit Lung Ruoxue? He wanted to smash the city wall with this little strength. Humph. You overestimate yourself. The guard scolded in disdain and ridicule, but before he could finish, he heard a crack in his ear. Gotcha. Immediately after that, the section of the city wall behind him fell straight down and crashed toward him. The guard was immediately dumbfounded. When he reacted and wanted to run, the collapsed city wall just happened to hit his thigh. At this time, Song ruthlessly kicked the other party. This time, the guard was firmly pressed by the city wall. He didn't even have the time to cry out in pain before the unlucky guard fainted. Seeing this scene, Wei couldn't help but cover his face. This scene was too beautiful, and he didn't dare to look at it directly. At the same time, the city gate was in chaos. Someone suddenly shouted, Alert! Warning! The rabbit tribe is attacking. Just as someone shouted, the city wall that had not collapsed just now seemed to respond to his scream and collapse like dominoes. What a good thing you've done. Seeing this, Wei did not hesitate to blame the other party. As the saying goes, those who watch the show are not afraid of things blowing up. Since he had no choice but to come here, he could only go with the flow. After seeing the rabbit's fearsome attributes, he decisively gave up and hugged Song's thigh. This rabbit was amazing. No, it's not my fault. The guard who had been wronged by the guard wing wanted to cry but had no tears. This really had nothing to do with him. This city wall was clearly collapsed by that rabbit, so how could it be counted as him? Woo. The guard felt that the sky was going to rain red. Who would help him clear his name? How is it none of your business? Before you shouted, The city wall was still fine, but after you shouted, the city wall collapsed. There's no way you can get away with it. We have so many eyes on you. Don't you guys agree? After the guard wing criticized a certain guard, they formed an alliance with the other foolish guards. Hearing guard wing's words, the guards instantly came back to their senses and looked at the unlucky guard with distrust, their faces full of doubt. If someone had to be the scapegoat for this matter, other than that rabbit, it would be this person. All the guards made the same decision and abandoned their companions. As the one who had been abandoned, the guard was so angry that he almost vomited blood. After choking on his words and emphasizing that it had nothing to do with him, the guard passed out in anger. Wei took a look and was greatly surprised. He didn't expect himself to have such an ability. If he had known this would happen, he would have used this chi mist flame back then. At that moment, he regretted not realizing that he had this ability earlier. I wonder if it's too late to pick up this specialty now? He couldn't make up his mind, but Song gave him an encouraging look. Suddenly Wei was excited. Thanks as a newly developed skill besides refining, the guard division was very excited. Just as they were about to find a few people to practice with, a group of guards suddenly ran out of the city. The leader of the group had the back of a tiger and the waist of a bear. As soon as he appeared, he asked in a loud voice, "The rabbit tribe is here? Where is he? If you're talking about me, I'm here." Azure waved his meaty paws and looked at the person who spoke. "Only you. Didn't they say that the rabbit tribe was attacking?" The leader of the guards was obviously a little disappointed. He had thought that there would be a rabbit slaughtering competition, but who knew that there was only one rabbit in front of him? This rabbit was not even the size of his palm. How could they fight it? Fuck. Who said that the rabbit tribe had attacked? After asking Song, the guard leader turned to the guards guarding the city and roared. When the city guard heard this, he immediately took a large step back in tacit understanding. This way, he just happened to expose the guard who said that the rabbit tribe had attacked. Fuck. You were the one who shouted? The leader of the guards gave the other party a hard knock on the head, and then said angrily, "There's only one rabbit, and you call it an attack by the rabbit tribe? What's with your eyes? Do you have to make such a fuss? Boss, it collapsed the city wall." One of the guards reminded him while holding his head that was in pain. At this time, the captain of the guards who had rushed over suddenly realized that the city wall had indeed become a pile of ruins. No wonder he felt that something was missing when he came. He finally found the problem. Wei deeply admired the guard leader's obvious belatedness, and cleverly pretended to be invisible. If it was a high-end dispute, it was obviously not something that a small figure like him could solve. As expected, when the guard leader heard the guard's words, he turned to glare at Song and asked, "You're the one who collapsed the city wall? What's your relationship with the other white rabbit?" "We're twins," Azure said with a smile. Twins. The guard leader was conflicted by this answer. He knew how strong that rabbit was, so this one was probably not something he could deal with at his level. "Go and inform the 3 Xianyi sirs. The younger twin brother of the rabbit is here." The leader of the guards made a decisive decision. Then, a guard quickly left like the wind. "Who told you I'm your little brother?" At this time, Azure looked at the guard leader with dissatisfaction. "Are you the older brother?" The guard leader was dumbfounded. He didn't know that this rabbit would care so much about seniority. "It's a must," Azure said matter-of-factly. Hearing Song's words, Guardian Wing laughed in his heart. If he didn't know that the rabbit had changed its color, he would have believed its words. But now, Jian Song had played the guard leader like a fool, and he felt very satisfied. Not long after, the extremely unwilling Xian Yi and the other two also slowly walked out of the city. Looking at the collapsed city wall, the 3 of them were very calm, because they were used to it. If the walls of the imperial city didn't collapse every few days, they wouldn't be able to adapt to it. However, what Xianyi didn't understand was, when did Song, that fake rabbit, have a twin brother? Why didn't he hear about it? Could it be that there were 2 guardian tower spirits? At the city gate, Xianyi, as the representative of the 3 reverent god-level cultivators, asked first, "May I ask who you are?" "I am the heavens." Azure gave him face as he smiled. "Good day, Sir Tian." The corners of Xian Yi's mouth twitched. One was azure, and the other was heaven. Wasn't it azure heaven when they were put together? It was just that he didn't know when another earth would appear, and they would make a pair. Chapter 2940. The Twins 5. The Heavens and the Earth. How domineering. Pulling back his wandering thoughts, Xian Yi coughed twice and asked in all seriousness, "May I know what business you have in the Imperial City? Do you still need to ask?" "Of course, I'm here to cause trouble," Azure said calmly. "All right." He had asked an idiotic question. Xian Yi was a little annoyed. He knew that without Schwerer, no one could make Senior Tsang speak properly. "What do we do now?" Seeing this, Xia Yi could not help but ask in a low voice. "What else can we do? Of course, I'll report this to the Divine Master," Xian Yi said with a smile. All right." Xia Yi sincerely prayed that when the Divine Master saw this rabbit, he would be able to remain calm and not explode with anger. Xia Yi called over a guard and gave him some instructions. The guard ran away as if he had received a special pardon. "The three of you are not bad." Seeing them so tactful, Song was simply too satisfied. As for Wei Yi, he looked at the scene in front of him and felt extremely confused. What was going on? "Bastard! What are you doing here?" At this moment, an angry roar sounded in everyone's ears. When Guard Wing heard this sound, he knew that it was the mist ripple. Immediately, he lowered his head even more, afraid that he would be recognized. A gust of wind blew, and Wu Xiao, who was dressed in black, appeared. Azure looked at Wu Xiao with a smile and said, "Little Lian bitch, why did you change to black? Could it be that he knew that he looked too ugly in red?" "You shut up." The mist was furious. "Stop roaring. Please don't roar. You haven't recovered from your injuries yet. If the blood vessels burst, how much blood would we have to suck to make up for it?" Cold quickly comforted. "You're here again. What do you want?" Hearing this, Wu Luan gritted her teeth and asked. The veins on her forehead were throbbing. She was already at the limit of her patience. However, she knew that the current her wasn't suitable to be entangled with Tsang. She just wanted to quickly get rid of this annoying fellow. "I've brought a little kid here to visit, and see if you're still alive," Cold Truth said. "Don't worry, I'm alive and well." River Mist replied angrily. "That's good, you have to take care of your body. My Neo still has to personally deal with you. So you can't die early, understand?" Azure said with concern. However, its concern was really driving him crazy. When Wei Yi heard the conversation between the man and the beast, he was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. It was obvious that these two were very familiar, even close to the point of being familiar. However, from their words, he could hear a feeling of love and death. What kind of rhythm was this? It had been too long since Guard Wing had been in the God realm. He clearly felt that he couldn't keep up with the situation. This was really too worrying. "By the way, please tell this kid that we're not on the same side." Just as Wei Yi was feeling sad, Song said and lifted Wei Yi's chin, making him face fog. Thanks. Immediately Wei Yi burst into tears. Wu Yan's eyes flickered and she shouted, "The Guardian Wing? You're finally willing to appear. You've got the wrong person," Wei Yi said in a low voice. At the same time, he couldn't help but glare at Song. Wu, why didn't she let him continue being an ostrich? "What? You're as timid as a mouse, you don't even dare to admit your identity." Ripple Mist laughed at Wei Yi's words. Wei Yi didn't say a word. Living was the most important thing. What could he do if he didn't admit his identity? It's not like you'll lose a piece of meat. "Wei Yi, hand over the forging experience that you gave you." Seeing that Wei Yi didn't speak, Wu Yan said, "What forging insights?" "I don't know." Wei Yi played dumb. "So you're saying that you don't want to protect the Armament Masters Guild?" Wu Chen threatened. If it wasn't for the sake of using the Craftsmen's Guild as bait, how could she possibly allow those craftsmen to show off in front of her? Now that they had met the Guardian Wing, the Craftsmen's Guild was naturally not of much use anymore. However, the threatened Guard Wing didn't say anything. In fact, he was having a strong mental struggle. To him, whether it was the Craftsmen's Guild or the smithing experience given to him by Lord Yu, they were both extremely important. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been afraid of being forced to leave the Craftsman's Guild and hide away by Fog. Now that he had reappeared and Fog Ripple had brought up the past, these two things that the other party had threatened him with were both his weaknesses. Little guy, don't be afraid. With me around, this old woman can't threaten you. Feeling Guardwing's struggle, Blue patted his shoulder and supported him, at the same time blocking the fog's pressure. Song, don't meddle in my business. This is a matter between me and him. This little guy is under my protection, so his matters are my matters. Azure smiled faintly, clearly wanting to meddle in this matter to the end. Hearing this, Wei felt Song's kindness and naturally continued to hug his thigh. He could see that the two of them really loved each other and wanted to kill each other. As for Rhyme, she couldn't do anything to this rabbit. However, at this time, he still didn't remember Song's identity. Or it could be said that he didn't connect the rabbit in front of him with the spirit of the god-protecting tower at all. As for Fog, because of Song's words, she was furious. Song, it's fine that you're going against me for Lung Ruoxua, but now you're still going against me for the sake of the Guardian Wing? Yes. Going against you is my greatest hobby. Azure smiled evilly. River Ripple was so angry that she couldn't say anything for a long time. After laughing enough, Song said, Little Yanlian bitch. I finally know why this little fellow doesn't dare to come to you city. Isn't it because he has that idiot yes artifact refining insights in his hands? You don't even know how to refine artifacts, yet you're fighting over this with a little fellow? You're a temporary god lord appointed by the laws of the world. Can we not do such a tasteless thing? Besides, so what if you collect that idiot's things for yourself? That idiot you has already fallen. Why do you have to see the object and think of him, deceiving yourself and others? That idiot you doesn't want to see you, and he doesn't want his things to be in your hands. So, I advise you to hand over the things that idiot you left behind. This way, you won't have to look at those things every day and feel sad. Hearing Song's words, Ripple Mist was so angry that she was about to explode. She was really just saying whatever she didn't want to hear. And her mouth was smelly and poisonous. What did he mean by snatching from a little fellow? Yes, tool refinement insights should have been hers, alright? What did he mean by a temporary divine master? She was definitely a true divine master. You had fallen, so the god world should be taken over by her. The person closest to her. She wasn't a person without class. He was not deceiving himself. You had pampered her when he was alive. So how could he not want to see her after he died? Fog retorted in her heart, her eyes spitting fire as she glared at Azure and Wei. In reality, she wanted to shout out these retorts, but she knew that no matter what she said, Azure, that annoying fellow, would have thousands of reasons for her. She really didn't want to waste any more time with Azure. At the same time, she also knew that if Cold One was determined to protect Guard Wing, she really couldn't snatch him from that damn cat. All she could do was ignore him. Chapter 2941. The Twins 6. At the same time, Azure couldn't be bothered with Rhyme Ice. In any case, he had come here today to prove to Wei that he and the others weren't in cahoots with Rhyme Ice. Now that his goal had been achieved, there was no reason for him to continue being entangled with Rhyme Ice. Little Lian bitch. I'm here today to prove one thing. What is it? As for Azure's unpredictable behavior, Fog was already too tired to complain, but she still cooperated and asked. Otherwise, this damn cat might come up with some evil tricks again. We're not on the same side. Didn't I just say it? Azure smiled smugly, then turned to ask Guardian Wing. Little guy, do you believe me now? I believe you. Wei was speechless. How could he not believe it? How angry was Wu Jing? However, he could only secretly stomp his feet. But there was nothing he could do about this rabbit that could change its color. In front of these two, he considered himself a disadvantageous group, and it was enough for him to be remembered by Fog alone, so he did not want to be remembered by this rabbit no matter what. That would definitely be a nightmare. It's good that you believe me. Little Lian slut. Today's matter is over. We will take our leave. After saying that, Azure waved goodbye to Ripple Mist and disappeared with the guard wing, causing Ripple Mist's face to darken. Was she being treated like a hot pot? Wuxia was really angry that Song came here just to torment her. But she knew Song too well and knew that it was absolutely not worth getting angry with him. But she was still angry. The furious Wu Yin glared at the guards who were already trembling like willows in the wind with a dark face before disappointedly disappearing. After Wu Yin had left for a long time, the leader of the guards asked in a daze, "Your Excellency Xianyi, isn't that rabbit called Tian? Why does the Divine Master call it Song?" Hearing this, Xianyi only looked deeply at the head guard and felt an inexplicable worry in his heart. He was quite anxious about the intelligence of the guard leader. Then, without even answering the guard leader's question, Xianyi also disappeared in a flash. When Xia Yi and the other man saw this, they shook their heads helplessly and left. The guard leader was still confused as he watched the important figures leave one by one. Unfortunately, even the ordinary guards were unwilling to pay attention to him. It was better not to talk about such a sensitive topic. After Tsong left the city with Guardian Wing, he saw Guardian Wing looking at him hesitantly. He immediately shouted, "If you have something to say, then say it. Senior, can we not be so rough?" Wei Yi secretly sighed, then made up his mind and said, "Senior, I want to go back to the Armament Guild headquarters to take a look." "Why are we going there?" Song raised his eyebrows and asked. "Ask them to move as soon as possible. I'm afraid that Wu Xian will find trouble with them." Wei Yi said honestly. "If that old woman really wants to find trouble with the Armament Guild headquarters, with your strength, what's the use of going back? I won't stop you if you want to die, but you have to hand over the 3 phoenixes first." Azure reminded, "Wei Yimo Sr., you're too unsympathetic." Seeing through Wei Yi's thoughts, Azure said with a disapproving expression, "Sympathy is not worth much." Bad guy. Peeking at his thoughts. "Thanks, do you really need me to peek at your thoughts? I really don't know how you've been hiding for so many years. That little bitch Rhyme has never found you. You're really too stupid." Azure continued. This time, Wei Yi didn't dare to let his thoughts run wild. If he knew what he was thinking, how could he live? "Senior, give me some face and don't strike me down." Taking a deep breath, the depressed Wei Yi begged. "All right. I won't agitate you since you look so pitiful. However, it's really useless for you to go to the Armament Guild headquarters at this time. If that old woman Wu Yan wants to destroy the Armament Guild headquarters, you'll just be a meat bun hitting a dog even if you go. Or is it that you've been hiding from that bitch for so many years just to be a meat bun in the end?" Azure blinked his black diamond eyes and asked with a smirk. Could she not call him a meat bun? He was a reverent god after all. Please respect the strong. Hearing Azure say this about him, Wei Yi couldn't help but feel angry again. However, just as he thought this, he immediately put away all his thoughts and didn't dare to let his imagination run wild. Otherwise, that old hag welcomes god-tier meat buns the most. Your blood will definitely be her best food. As expected, Azure continued to attack. "Senior, can you help me?" Wei Yi, who wanted to cry but had no tears, knew that the strength of the rabbit in front of him was unfathomable, so he asked for help. "How do you want me to help you, little meat bun?" Azure blinked innocently. He was not called Bun Hit Dog. Wei Yi silently cried but still said, "I know that Senior's strength is powerful and you're not afraid of the miasma, so I would like to ask Senior to protect the Armament Guild headquarters." "You want to hug my thigh?" Azure asked. Yes. Wei Yi hurriedly nodded. He knew that Song was strong, so if he didn't hug him now, when would he? "Not everyone can hug my thigh." Seeing this, Azure said proudly, "Senior, let the Craftsman's Guild hold on to your thigh. In the future, if you want to refine a divine artifact, you can do it. You don't need to spend any money, and all the craftsmen are at your command. How cost-effective is this? Don't you agree?" Wei Yi hurriedly spoke of the benefits, but Song frowned as he listened. "Your sister." It was an artifact spirit, and the god-protecting pagoda was an innate chaotic-level divine artifact. Did it need other divine artifacts? So in its eyes, the Craftsman's Guild was really of little value. But a certain person was not aware of it and thought that the Craftsman's Guild was so high and mighty. "I don't need to forge," Azure said in disdain. It was a tool. A top-grade divine artifact. Senior, although you're a beast, with a weapon, you won't have to use your claws to scratch people. It's easier this way. Wei Yi spared no effort to continue to tempt him, and at the same time he became stubborn, making Azure agree no matter what. I'm not afraid of wasting my claws. Azure felt that he had suffered a loss. Senior. Jian Song's words didn't work. Wei Yi could only put down his pride and drag out his voice to beg. Sure enough, Azure was frightened by Wei Yi's voice. He uncomfortably shook his fur, then slapped Wei Yi's head with his paw and roared. Speak properly, or I'll hand you over to the Miss Bitch. Wei Yi, who had been beaten until his eyes were filled with stars, looked pitifully at Song, feeling extremely wronged. At this moment, he no longer had the wild and cool demeanor he had when he met Lung Ruoxue and the others. He only wanted to hug their thighs and seek protection. Seeing him like this, Song almost went crazy and wanted to melt it down to make more. However, after thinking about it, it was not bad to get Nyo a weapon master guild to play with. It was better than letting it fall into the hands of the rippling fog bitch. So in the next second, it agreed. Seeing that Azure had finally agreed, Wei Yi was moved to tears. Woo. It really wasn't easy. He had wasted his time acting coquettishly and acting cute. Hard work paid off. Senior, thank you. Wei Yi said excitedly. Chapter 2942. The Twins 7. Don't thank me too early. I'm telling you, what's mine is Nyo's. So, even though I'm protecting your armament guild headquarters, it still belongs to Nyo. In the future, all of you have to listen to her. Azure warned. Understood. Wei Yi nodded. Suddenly he felt envious, jealous, and hateful towards Lung Ruoxue. How blissful would it be to have such a big thigh to hug? That's right, that little girl said that she was Master Yes' disciple. Could it be true? Filled with doubt, Guardwing looked at Azure, his face filled with questions. Nyo is indeed the disciple of Dummy You. Seeing the situation, Song said truthfully. It seems like I'm the one with the heart of a vile person. Wei Yi said, somewhat embarrassed. It's good that you know. However, we're all magnanimous and won't hold it against you. Azure said magnanimously. As he spoke, he teleported with the Guardian Wing. It only put down Guardian Wing when it arrived at the Blacksmith Guild headquarters. This also made Wei Yi let out a long sigh of relief. Otherwise, if the weapon craftsman saw him being carried like this, it would damage his image. After entering the Craftsman's Guild headquarters, the first thing Wei Yi did was to look for the guild master. However, he was informed by the waiter that the guild master was in seclusion. Tell your guild leader to come out quickly, or I'll smash the Armament Guild headquarters. Hearing this, Azure immediately roared. Senior, calm down. You can't smash this place. Hearing Song's words, Wei Yi was afraid. Was this person addicted to smashing other people's houses? Why do you always like to cause trouble? Aren't you in closed-door cultivation? I just want to get that president out. Azure said innocently. I have an idea, there's no need to trouble Senior. Said Wei Yi, trying to please him. Then you do it. This lord's patience is limited. Song waved his little paw and found a place to sit down. Wei Yi wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and showed a token to the servant. Unfortunately, the servant did not recognize the token. In the Guardian Wing, he could only say helplessly, "What's wrong with the Guardian Wing?" The waiter asked in confusion. Don't you know that the first guild master of the Craftsman Guild was called Guardian Wing? Wei Yi asked, almost making the waiter go crazy. So what? Does it have anything to do with you? Don't think that just because you have the same name as our founding president, you have special privileges in the Armament Guild headquarters. Remember, this is the Armament Guild headquarters. The waiter said proudly. Wei Yi was dumbfounded. Azure couldn't help but cover his mouth with his little paws and laugh. Glancing at Song's reserved smile, Wei Yi was depressed. Senior, if you want to laugh, laugh. There's no need to be embarrassed. Wei Yi sighed. Hee hee. Didn't I tell you to smash it? Azure laughed evilly, clearly rejoicing in his misfortune. Daring to smash the Armament Guild headquarters, you're quite bold. Seeing this man and beast acting as if he didn't exist, the waiter's anger surged to his head. I've even smashed the Divine Lord's estate. What's the Armament Guild? Azure said disapprovingly. What big words. At this moment, an angry voice interrupted. Thanks, and who are you? I'm an honorary elder of the Armament Guild headquarters. You can call me Eldering. The one who spoke was a middle-aged man who was currently walking down the stairs. He was not very strong, only a god king. However, to be able to become an honorary elder of the Craftsmen's Guild, Wei was clear that this person definitely had talent in forging. Afraid that Song Jun would smash the Blacksmith Guild headquarters in a fit of anger, Wei went up and grabbed his collar, ordering, "Tell the Armament Guild headquarters manager to come out. I have important matters to attend to." You're ordering me? Eldering blinked her eyes and asked in disbelief. Hurry up, or you'll have to bear the consequences. Wei threatened, and released a trace of pressure. Instantly, Elder Ying's little face turned pale, and she scrambled up the stairs. The waiter was also so scared that his little body kept trembling. In fact, he also wanted to run, but his legs were weak. Who dares to come to the Craftsmen's Guild headquarters and cause trouble? Not long after, a group of weapon craftsmen ran down from upstairs with all kinds of weapons in their hands. I want to see the president. Seeing this, Guard Wing repeated. The president is in seclusion. May I know who you are? When the leader saw Guardian Wing in person, he immediately changed his attitude. This person gave him the feeling that he was very strong. As a non-combat guild, he really didn't want to make an enemy out of a stranger. What about the vice president? Wei asked again. Little guy, the two vice presidents here are with my girl. Song laughed before the other party could reply. Wei Mo. So he had come here for nothing? Who's your girl? Our vice leader is in Demon City? The leader of the group asked in surprise. Could it be that something had happened to the two vice presidents? But why didn't they receive any news at all? My girl is Lung Ruoxia. Azure said arrogantly with a proud face. Art. So it was Miss Lung's beastie. It was a misunderstanding. We didn't know your identity. Please don't take it to heart. Seeing Tsang mention Lung Ruoxia's name, the leader's attitude immediately took a 180-degree turn. He treated Song even better than before. Seeing this, Green proudly gave Wei a provocative look, his black eyes red as he wrote. Look, my girl's name is better than yours, right? Facing Song's smugness, Wei could only feel depressed, because he couldn't deny that the girl's name was better than his. Because even if he said the two words Wei, people would think that they had the same name. I don't blame you. Who's the one in charge of the Armament Guild headquarters now? Azure asked, showing his magnanimity. That's me. I'm the fifth elder of the Armament Guild headquarters. That person took the initiative to say, Don't you know him? Pointing at Wei, Azure asked with a smirk. Hearing this, the fifth elder carefully sized up the guard division, but in the end, he still shook his head. He looks familiar, but I can't remember where I've seen him before. He's the Guardian Wing, the first president of the Craftsmen's Guild. Song solved the mystery. What? Hearing this, the fifth elder's face paled. He continued to stare at the Guardian Wing in disbelief. To be honest, he had only heard of the name of the Guardian Wing and had never seen it in person. However, he had seen the image of the founding president once, and the man in front of him gave him a sense of déjà vu. But he couldn't just randomly call himself the president. Even though he believed that Lung Ruoxia's beastie would not lie to them, he still had to verify it. May I ask if your excellency has any proof? The fifth elder asked after he had examined her. Hearing this, Azure couldn't help but laugh madly. He pointed at Wei and said, Little guy, they want evidence just like you. Really, if you're not family, you'll join the same family. Wei's face darkened, but he still took out the token from before and showed it to the fifth elder. Seeing the token, the fifth elder was instantly excited. This was the personal token of the first president. Chapter 2943. The Twins 8, President. After confirming, the fifth elder's eyes were filled with tears as he choked. You admit it just like that? Aren't you going to confirm it? Song reminded. Senior, what do you mean? Was he afraid that the world would not be in chaos? Wei looked at Song with a face full of hidden bitterness. There's no need to confirm. He's definitely our guild leader. The fifth elder said with certainty. He believed that Lung Ruoxia's beastie would not lie to him. After all, his relationship with the Armament Guild headquarters was not ordinary. Fifth elder, I have an important matter to discuss with your current president. Please ask him to come out of seclusion. Guard Wing, whose identity had finally been confirmed, said cautiously. All right. President, please wait a moment. The fifth elder said respectfully. Finished speaking, the fifth elder personally went to handle this matter. While Wei Yi and Azure were also invited into the VIP room. Sitting on the chair in the VIP room, Wei Yi looked at Song with a puzzled expression. What's wrong? Cold asked as he felt Guard Wing's gaze. Why didn't they suspect anything when you said you were Lung Ruoxia's beastie? Regarding this question, Wei Yi had been thinking for a while, but he couldn't figure it out. Character. Do you understand? Azure said smugly, then sprawled on the table. These words caused Wei Yi to feel a sense of melancholy. President. Suddenly, a whirlwind rushed in from the outside and headed straight for the Guardian Wing. Guard Wing, who wasn't prepared at all, was thrown to the ground. Damn it, get up. Wei Yi's face darkened as he angrily glared at the person on top of him. Guild leader, I'm so excited. A certain man said with an embarrassed expression. He was the Armament Guild's current president, Xueqi. I have something important to discuss with you. Wei Yi nodded his head in understanding and said straightforwardly. Please speak, President. Xueqi said, a little like a lackey. Although it was not the time to reminisce, Wei Yi still explained the cause and effect of his disappearance to Xueqi and several elders who had followed him. He also emphasized that Wu Ice might attack the Craftsmen's Guild. When Xueqi and the other elders heard this, they were at a loss. Without Wei Yi even mentioning Tsang, Xueqi and the other elders all turned their eyes to Tsang. In the entire God world, Lung Ruoxia was the only one who dared to go against Wucheng. In the future, the Craftsmen's Guild will be under my protection. Seeing this, Cold waved his claws and said very arrogantly, Thank you, this beast race senior. Thank you, Miss Lung. Xueqi and the others quickly expressed their thanks. Wei Yi was depressed that they were acting like lackeys. From the looks of it, other than him who did not know Lung Ruoxia, everyone else knew her. More importantly, that little girl's position in the divine realm seemed to be quite high. Thanks originally he had thought that he would have to spend a lot of effort to convince the always proud Armament Guild headquarters to be willing to rely on the protection of others. Unexpectedly, it was completely different from what he had imagined in advance. Without even letting him speak any nonsense, this group of people from the Armament Guild headquarters had spontaneously found a thigh to hug. Such a fact made him, the founding president of the Armament Guild headquarters, feel no sense of accomplishment. But now that things had come to this, everyone was happy. He could finally be at ease. Unfortunately, he didn't feel at ease for long. In order to show his protection, Song directly injected his divine power into his voice and shouted at the top of his voice. Ripple Miss Bitch, the Armament Guild headquarters is mine now. I dare you to touch it. These powerful words instantly spread throughout the entire divine realm. Immediately, cold sweat appeared on the foreheads of Wei Yi and the others. Was this a provocation? However, in a short period of time, they probably wouldn't know whether this was a provocation or not. After hearing Tsang's words, Fog Ice chose to ignore it. Right now, healing was the most important thing. She didn't have time for the weaponsmith's quarter. In her eyes, the Wei Yi would be in her pocket sooner or later, so she wasn't in a hurry. After Azure had taken Guardian Wing to settle the issue of ownership of the Weapon Masters Guild, he had brought Guardian Wing around the Divine Realm before returning to the abandoned land. Although Guard Wing had protested countless times that Azure shouldn't take him away, it was a pity that he was completely ignored. Seeing Wei Yi return home, Lung Ruoxia and the others quickly looked him up and down. When they saw that he was completely unharmed, they instantly felt relieved. After all, he was the Great Elder's master in name, and the Great Elder would feel heartache if he was hurt. This time, there was no need for Lung Ruoxia and the others to waste their breath. Wei Yi directly said, I've hidden the 3 phoenixes. You, Lung Ruoxue didn't know what Azure had done to change Wei Yi's attitude, but the difference was too great. She couldn't believe it. Senior Tsong is my thigh now. Wei Yi saw Lung Ruoxue's face full of question marks and took the initiative to explain to her. Lung Ruoxue and the others were silent. Did this mean that Wei Yi was clinging on to Shang Tsung's thigh? No wonder he was so obedient. Girl, don't be too touched. Hearing this, Song's face was begging for a caress. Lung Ruoxue did as it wished and touched Song's fur. Song closed its eyes in happiness and lay in Lung Ruoxue's arms. Seeing this rabbit acting so coquettishly, Wei Yi couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. This was the rabbit that had kidnapped him? Why was he so gentle towards Lung Ruoxue, but so simple and rough towards her? In fact, Wei Yi was too embarrassed to tell everyone that after Tsong took him away, he beat him up before taking him to the immortal realm. Of course, they also went to the imperial city. When they arrived, a certain rabbit showed his divine might and directly collapsed the walls of the imperial city. As expected, they also saw fog ice in the imperial city. He had personally witnessed the scolding battle between Lung Ruoxue's rabbit and Fog Phoenix. He had also witnessed how Fog Phoenix was so infuriated by a certain rabbit that her blood vessels almost burst. In the rabbit's words, "Didn't you want evidence? I'll bring you directly to the Ripple Mist. After finding trouble with Rime Ice, I'll let you see my girl's reputation in the divine realm." As expected, Wei Yi's vision started to change and he gave in. This rabbit was too terrifying. He couldn't afford to offend it. More importantly, the Armament Guild headquarters still needed their protection. Sob. Thinking about what had happened these past few days, those were all tears. Now, are you willing to tell me where the 3 phoenixes are? Lung Ruoxue could feel that Wei Yi had been through a lot these past few days, so she couldn't help but ask in a gentle voice. And Wei Yi nodded his head vigorously. Could he not tell? He had already seen the evidence, and he had also hugged a certain rabbit's thigh. If he didn't say anything, that rabbit would probably go crazy. At that time, wouldn't he be the unlucky one? After that, Wei Yi brought Lung Ruoxue and the others to the backyard and opened one of the doors. He then said, "Come in with me." Upon entering the room, Lung Ruoxue and the rest realized that it was an extremely ordinary room. Other than an old bed, there was no other furniture in the room. Naturally, there were no signs of the 3 phoenixes. However, Lung Ruoxue and the rest did not say much. They only followed Wei Yi with calm expressions. Seeing this, the more guard Wing felt that his previous suspicion had been unnecessary. Chapter 2944. The twins 9. In reality, he didn't want that to happen either. However, it had been too long since he had moved around the divine world, and Fog Ice had been searching for his whereabouts all this time. Thus he had to be on guard. After opening a wall and revealing a secret passage, he brought Lung Ruoxue and the rest in. After walking for an unknown amount of time, Lung Ruoxue and the rest finally saw a ray of light. They then realized that this secret tunnel led to a mountain, because they were already in an unknown mountain. In the next second, they were surrounded by hundreds of armed men in gray. Our own people. Wei Yi took out a token and showed it to the other. Seeing this, the other party immediately put away his weapon and looked at Guard Wing with a respectful expression. He hesitated and said, "You're the boss? What, you don't even recognize me?" Wei Yi sighed helplessly. "And no, it's not that. It's just that your face is different." A gray-robed man said carefully. "I've been detoxified," Wei Yi explained. When the gray-clothed people heard this, they immediately cheered and crowded around the guard division as they walked to the front. Lung Ruoxue and the rest pretended to be invisible and followed behind them silently. Knowing that they had been brought here by the Guardian Wing, the gray-clothed men were very polite to them after confirming their identities. The mountain path was rather rugged. Lung Ruoxue and the rest followed behind Wei Yi and the rest for a long time before they reached the peak. At the top of the mountain, there was a spacious 3-story building built against the mountain. Lung Ruoxue could tell with a single glance that it was also a house. "Little girl, this is my base camp. I've placed the 3 phoenixes here." After entering the courtyard, Wei Yi turned around and said to Lung Ruoxue, Master, you're back? At the same time, a young man quickly came to Wei Yi's side and shouted with excitement. This is my disciple Meng Xiao. Wei Yi introduced. The previous president of the Craftsmen's Guild? Leng Ruoxue said. You recognize me? Meng Xiao asked in surprise. I don't recognize you. Leng Ruoxue replied honestly. Meng Xiao was depressed. She couldn't recognize him, but she could still tell his identity. I recognized the first elder and the 2 vice presidents of the Craftsmen's Guild. Leng Ruoxue smiled. I see. Meng Xiao understood. At this moment, Leng Ruoxue moved the head elder of the Craftsmen's Guild out. Lu Yu and Mo Yin were with him. As soon as Mo Yin came out, he was also not used to it. All these years he had been staying in Shui Er's space with his disciple, almost never leaving the house, so he had no idea how he had been moved out. However, before he could ask the question in his heart, he saw Wei Yi and Meng Xiao standing not far away from the corner of his eye. He immediately became excited. President! Mo Yin shouted, and then excitedly pounced on the 2. He was more familiar with Meng Xiao, but he was not as unfamiliar with Wei Yi as the others in the Craftsmen's Guild. After all, Wei Yi was a godlike figure in the hearts of the craftsmen of this generation. Mo Yin excitedly threw himself in front of Meng Xiao and Wei Yi, choking with sobs. At this moment, Lu Yu and the great elder also walked over, and the few of them hugged each other and cried. Seeing this, Leng Ruoxue and the others automatically made way for them while they hid in another corner of the courtyard. Little girl, do you still remember me? Suddenly, a slightly flirtatious voice rang in Leng Ruoxue's ears. Thanks. Leng Ruoxue turned around and saw that the person who spoke was a young man. The man's clothes were unusually bright, like a peacock fighting for beauty. Upon seeing this person, Leng Ruoxue frowned before looking at the demon. You are Xiao Fan from Black Fog Cliff? The demon revealed the man's identity. Xiao Fan was excited when he saw that he had been recognized. He immediately ran to the demon and said, Not bad, you still remember me. You're not like a certain heartless person who had long forgotten about me. Hearing this, Leng Ruoxue and the rest had goosebumps all over their bodies. However, his words had successfully attracted the attention of Uncle Long, and the rest towards Leng Ruoxue. Needless to say, the heartless person this person was referring to was definitely Shui Er. As for Leng Ruoxue, after the cold chill, she acted as if she had not heard Xiao Fan's words and said calmly, Your boss can't leave now. Take us to see the 3 phoenixes. Little girl, it's fine if you pretend not to know me, but you still want me to run errands for you? Xiao Fan pointed at Leng Ruoxue and said, Do you want me to find it myself? Oh. If I were to look for it myself, I can't guarantee what this place would look like. Leng Ruoxue threatened. I'm scared of you, okay? I'll take you there. Sighing, Xiao Fan said in a sullen tone. Then stop talking nonsense. Leng Ruoxue urged, forcing Xiao Fan to swallow back his unspoken complaints. Xiao Fan, who had resigned himself to his fate, led the way in front, but his heart was beating fast. This little girl's aura was much stronger than when they met her in the Haotian continent. At that time, Leng Ruoxue was just a little kid in their eyes, but now, he was full of tears. After leading Leng Ruoxue and the others to the backyard, Xiao Fan pointed to a courtyard and said, It's there, you guys go. Leng Ruoxue nodded and brought the demon and the rest to the courtyard. There were only 2 rooms in the small courtyard. Leng Ruoxue pushed open one of the rooms, and it just so happened that her 2 old phoenixes were living inside. At this moment, the 2 old phoenixes were lying side by side on the bed, unconscious. Leng Ruoxue examined their injuries and discovered that they were only in a deep sleep due to their injuries. Their lives were not in danger, so she was relieved. Not long after, he took out 2 supreme-grade healing pills and fed them to the 2 old phoenixes. The 2 old phoenixes slowly woke up. As soon as they woke up, Feng Hua and Feng Miao were both a little confused. After being stunned for a while, the 2 of them touched each other and said in unison, Have we recovered from our injuries? The moment the 2 of them woke up, their consciousness was still at the moment when they were injured. Now that they saw that the 2 of them had no injuries at all, they were quite surprised. Who had saved them? The 2 of them looked at each other, their eyes still filled with confusion. They were obviously slow to react, so they did not realize that they were being watched. What a good gay friend. Uncle Long Sai woke up the two of them from their daze. Arg. Who are you? Feng Hua and Feng Miao raised their heads and saw that there were a few more people in the room, and they were immediately shocked. You don't even recognize your master? Uncle Long pointed at Lung Ruoxia and asked. And master? Feng Hua asked carefully. He could sense that his master was very close to him, but was this ugly woman in front of him really his master? The Phoenix Fire didn't dare to recognize it. It would be so embarrassing if he recognized the wrong master. Old Fire. Sighing softly, Lung Ruoxia looked at Old Fire's silly expression and could only speak on her own. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.